Rebirth as a Russian tycoon. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 301, Ma Huang's Might. It seems that, because the box was too expensive, the rare costumes are not all available. And the ordinary costumes are the same. They can only be opened through ordinary boxes. Mawei clicked on the recharge button after he finished speaking and then recharged another $200,000 to his account without saying anything. The 4,500 netizens in the live broadcast room were all going crazy. How long has it been playing the game? And he recharged another $200,000? Question mark? Oh my god. Rich man. I want to have a baby with you. I have never seen anyone spend so much money on playing games. Oh my god. In less than 5 minutes, he recharged another $200,000? God, forgive me, I don't understand the world of rich people. I used to think that eating an $8 hamburger for breakfast, a $20 steak for lunch, and a $100 seafood for dinner was already extremely luxurious. I didn't expect that when I saw the anchor today, I deeply realized how low I was. I spent $400,000 playing a game, which can buy a Ferrari 360, right? Marwen's Krypton Gold Live broadcast is the first rich man in the world who dares to play like this. So the surprise and sensation caused were unprecedented. While he was still spending money to collect treasure chests and preparing to open all the costumes in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, some online news editors had already started preparing materials to report his amazing move in detail. The title was, "The Richest V-Guest Starts a Krypton Gold Live Broadcast, Spending $400,000 in 5 minutes, just to open the game costumes." Once these news were reported, Marwen's V-Guest Live broadcast would be even more lively. His newly developed Counter-Strike, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds would also be more popular. It was equivalent to spending $400,000, which not only showed off the coolness, but also played a strong advertisement. It was so happy. Okay, now the costumes are finally all opened. A total of $320,000 was spent, and there are more than 600 boxes left. That is to say, with 300,000, you can open all the equipment in this game. Marwei said in a faint voice in the live broadcast room. At this time, the number of netizens watching his live broadcast had risen to 7,000. There are 1,000 more people than Anne Hathaway, who has been very popular recently. But Marwei doesn't care about this kind of popularity. Because he is the chairman of VKE Live, the entire Live broadcast company belongs to him, and there is no need to compete with his employees to see who is more popular. Some netizens said that the $1 million I gave to Annie the other day was a system failure in full stater. In order to clarify the facts here, please take a look. All my money was recharged from the bank to VKE. There is no bug or fraud. As the chairman of VKE, Marwei must stand up and explain some malicious rumors on the internet. After speaking, he directly opened the VKE video recharge background and then recharged another $1 million in front of all the netizens. Then he entered Anne Hathaway's live broadcast room and started the live broadcast. Marwen's recharge was not fraudulent, that's right. But there was one piece of information that he didn't say. That is, 50% of his reward will eventually flow into the VK company account, that is, his own pocket. After deducting taxes, there is still a lot left. It is much better than those wild local tyrants who randomly reward female anchors. Moreover, Marwen's reward can also be used for advertising and building momentum for VK Live broadcast. So in comparison, although it is the same reward, the meaning and benefits are different. The more than 7,000 netizens who saw this scene no longer knew how to describe Marwen's generosity. Looking at the full 7-digit recharge amount, it seems that it will be used for awards again. This is simply crazy and cool. The local tyrant is so rich that he has no friends. When Marwen's LV56 royal account Millie Marley Han with the highest level in the entire network appeared in Anne Hathaway's live broadcast room, the golden font representing his privileges appeared gorgeously in the message area. Royal Millie Marley Han, enter the room. In Anne's room, the spectators who saw this message were instantly boiling. They hadn't seen Ma Huang giving rewards these days, and thought that it was really a huge reward error caused by a system bug, as said on the internet. Ma Huang, you finally showed up. I was wondering where the rich man had been these days. I didn't expect that he would show up as soon as I thought about it. Ma Huang showed up. I'm so surprised. How many tens of thousands of rewards are you going to give today? I can't hold back my excitement. I believe the scene must be very spectacular. To be honest, these netizens on the internet are all talented. They also speak very well. As the barrage of Ma Huang filled the screen, Anne Hathaway, who was sitting in front of the live broadcast, also noticed Ma Wen's arrival. So she smiled at the camera, and that charming smile instantly fascinated many netizens watching the live broadcast. "Let me sing a song to welcome someone's arrival," Hathaway said in the live broadcast room with her red lips slightly opened. She hadn't seen Ma Huang appear in the past 2 days, and to be honest, she felt a little disappointed. She was afraid that it was because she didn't perform well enough that someone lost interest. So, Anne Hathaway sang a classic European and American song Lemon Tree in front of the camera seriously. The lively rhythm and melody, and the slightly sad lyrics give the whole song an indescribable charm. Under Hathaway's sweet singing, the song is like a brainwash, and many people can't forget its melody after listening to it. "You sing well, keep it up." After Ma Wen sent the barrage, he clicked the mouse and clicked the reward button under the live broadcast window. In front of many netizens, he chose the Golden V Guest Super Cruise missile. He did this to prove that the rewards in the previous 2 days were not a website loophole or false data. The second is that he is willing to spend some money to make Anne Hathaway famous. Let her become the first anchor of V Guest live broadcast. After all, Hathaway has the appearance and ability to do that. User Ma Huang rewarded Annie Hathaway with 2000 V Guest Super Cruise missiles. Click to receive the gold treasure box. As the system message prompted again, 2000 golden Super Cruise missiles whizzed from the right side of the screen and swept across the left side of the screen. Fuck. Another 2000 Super Cruise missiles. $1 million. Too scary. A group of golden cruise missiles. This special effect of more than 10 seconds is more expensive than the world's top fireworks. That's only $5,000 per second. Majesty. We have seen this $1 million reward clearly from the recharge to the delivery. It is absolutely genuine. Chapter 302. Meeting celebrity netizens. Ma Wen was watching Anne Hathaway's live broadcast. So there were 2 live broadcast rooms, and they saw his $1 million reward. Seeing Ma Wen, this was another $1 million reward neatly. Anne Hathaway, who was sitting in front of the live camera, was really impressed by Ma Wen's courage. "Thank you Malihan for the 2000 Super Cruise missiles. Thank you so much." Hathaway sincerely thanked Ma Wen. If possible, she would like to meet this rich man offline. Let's see if it's the same as previously guessed. Malihan is her boss, Mavey Group Chairman Ma Wen. "You're welcome, I'm leaving first." For Ma Wen now, it would cost him millions of dollars to make a random explosion scene. A reward of $1 million is simply a drizzle. But for Hathaway and the netizens watching the live broadcast, it is a terrifying number that makes people discouraged. As soon as Ma Wen turned off the paid live broadcast, he found that he had received a private message from Hathaway in the background. "Why did you leave so soon? I actually prepared 2 songs, but I haven't sung them for you yet." Ma Wen looked at Hathaway's message, then typed and joked, "According to the price of $1 million for one song, I'm so poor that I can't even afford to listen to it." Anne Hathaway, who was sitting in front of the computer, couldn't help biting her lip after receiving Ma Wen's reply. Then she stretched out her bare hand and typed on the pink keyboard, "That's not what I meant. It's free." Hathaway didn't expect to get tips from her live broadcast. It was just a part-time job after school. Since Ma Wen rewarded her with $1.15 million last time, Anne Hathaway felt a lot of pressure in addition to her joy. She became a little worried. 2 minutes later, she saw that someone had not replied for a long time, and she was afraid of any misunderstanding. Hathaway was a little anxious and added in the private message, "If you don't believe me, I can sing it to you in an environment other than live broadcast." In fact, it was not Maweli who misunderstood, but his lion, Zinbi, ran into his room to act coquettishly with him and asked for a touch. By the way, he also rubbed Maweli's cheek with his furry head. At the same time, his body made a snoring sound of satisfaction. "Oh, is that so?" Maweli typed these words casually on the keyboard. Half a minute later, Hathaway replied, "Yeah. The time and place are up to you." Anne Hathaway is not afraid of meeting a flying, because she is confident that Maweli will find that she is more beautiful in person than in the video. After all, the current live broadcast technology does not add any beauty function or filter function. Therefore, there will be no such thing as female anchors and female internet celebrities dying in the light. For example, a local tyrant once spent millions to reward a female anchor. In the end, when they met a flying, both her temperament and appearance were far inferior to those in the live broadcast. This contrast instantly made the rich man feel disappointed. It would be better to keep the fantasy and not meet. 5 days later, a Bombardier Global Express from Russia landed smoothly at the New York airport. Maweli in the cabin had just dealt with the problem of his smartphone in Silicon Valley. Then he came to New York to meet his female anchor, Anne Hathaway. Maweli in this life is really arrogant. Some time ago, he just hung out with the hot Victoria's Secret model. In the blink of an eye, he came to meet the famous Hollywood actress in his previous life, Anne Hathaway, the goddess in the hearts of many men around the world. She lives a very chic life. It's enviable. In a cafe in downtown New York, Anne Hathaway, who is dressed exquisitely, wears her black slim short skirt and a white off-shoulder chiffon shirt. Holding a cup of coffee in her hand, she sits in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looks out at the street. Her soft lips are painted with rosy lipstick. Bright and beautiful big eyes, decorated with eyelashes, have an intoxicating charm. Fair skin, delicate face, even if sitting quietly, are like scenery, attracting attention. Today is the day Hathaway is meeting with the V-guest Tycoon. To be honest, I'm a little nervous. I'm afraid that my performance is not perfect, and I will be disliked by the Tycoon. That would be very sad. 5 minutes later, Hathaway, who was in a nervous mood, suddenly saw a pure black Rolls-Royce Phantom head-class luxury car driving smoothly in front of the coffee shop. Then the door was opened by the black-clad bodyguard, and a handsome Russian youth wearing sunglasses appeared in front of her like a world star under the afternoon sun. Such a scene made Hathaway feel a little faster, because she recognized at a glance that the young man who walked out of the car was her V-guest live broadcast boss, Maweli himself. Although they only met briefly in the company last time, but Hathaway will not forget Maweli's appearance, because the impression is too deep. Even though she had guessed someone's identity before, Hathaway was still very nervous during the actual meeting, especially when Maweli walked into the coffee shop with the bodyguard opening the door. This made Hathaway feel like she was dreaming. She quickly stood up and greeted Maweli. Chairman Maweli. Good afternoon. Don't call me chairman. I'm here to meet my online friend this time. Maweli smiled slightly. It feels good to meet online friends, especially celebrity level online friends. It must be said that Anne Hathaway is very good at dressing up. She also knows how to be charming. For example, the black slim short skirt she wore made Hathaway's two straight white long legs have a very fatal temptation. Especially in the spring afternoon, under the warm sunshine, the whiteness makes people feel holy. Hearing that the big boss Maweli asked her to be more casual, Hathaway smiled beautifully and said, Maweli netizen, hello, my name is Anne Hathaway. Hathaway's adaptability is really fast. Her adaptability is also first class. No wonder she became a famous Hollywood actress in her previous life. She is talented and beautiful. You seem to have guessed it was me a long time ago. Maweli is not a fool. From Hathaway's reaction, he knew that her identity should have been exposed a long time ago. Millie Marley Hung. This online name is very cute. Hathaway did not answer Maweli's question directly. Instead, she smiled and teased Maweli for being cute. Women. Their brain circuits are so unique. Acting cute and cute are their strengths. Chapter 303. A tryst at a female star's home. Oh, women. Their brain circuits are so strange. Acting cute and being nice are their strengths. This is very similar to cats, relying on their cute appearance. They act cute in various ways. If they meet a straight man, they would have punched them one by one. Thank you for your compliment. Mawei showed his signature smile. Since his luxury car team appeared in front of the coffee shop, it has attracted the attention of many people in the store. As expected, beautiful women go with rich men. Ordinary men really can't chat up a beauty like Hathaway. The two chatted briefly in the coffee shop. Then Mawei and Hathaway got into the Rolls-Royce Phantom outside the door one after another and drove away. Only the dust raised by the wheels and the envious eyes of everyone in the store were left. It makes people sigh. Hey, if I could be as rich as him, I could pick up beautiful women at will and change one every day. A petty bourgeoisie who was drinking coffee thought to himself. At this time, his new laptop can no longer be his capital for showing off. Instead, it looks a bit shabby. Inside the Rolls-Royce, Hathaway, wearing a black short skirt, has a pair of thin and long white legs, which are placed very dignified next to Mawei's legs. The strong contrast between black and white makes Hathaway's beautiful legs have a very tempting visual impact. To use a netizen's words to describe it, I can play with these legs for 3 years without getting tired of them. In addition to the attractive white and beautiful legs, Hathaway's white off-shoulder chiffon shirt outlines her delicate collarbone very well, making people want to kiss her. Under the charming collarbone, the full and sexy double rhyme, with a youthful breath, stands in front of someone. Through the slightly transparent chiffon shirt, it makes people feel that it has begun to take shape in the haze. The car is very quiet, and Mawei is not the kind of person who has never seen a beautiful woman. So he still has self-control and sense of propriety. He did not show any lustful or pig-like expression attracted by beauty. On the contrary, Hathaway, who was sitting on his left, felt a little uneasy because of Mawei's lack of performance. I don't know if the big boss is satisfied with her performance today. The sentence just now praising him for being cute was also said by Hathaway with great difficulty and courage. Mawei, my apartment is in front. Hathaway said softly with her red lips slightly opened. The two chatted and accidentally talked about the live broadcast environment. So Hathaway invited Mawei to go to her work-live broadcast room to take a look. The apartment is quite high-end, Mawei said with a smile. I rent it with my best friend. Hathaway, 20 years old, although talented, still has little social experience. So she didn't hear that Mawei's words were just a joke, and there was no other meaning. Renting with a best friend? Then it would be inconvenient for me to go there, right? Mawei said to someone casually. Little did he know that Hathaway, who was sitting next to him, treated every word of Mawei as a very important task to give an answer. Isn't it inconvenient? She should still be in the school library at this time. Hathaway hurriedly explained to Mawei. She was afraid of spoiling the boss's mood. Mawei smiled after hearing this. Who would have thought that the Hollywood star in the previous life was still so green at the age of 20? She answered all the questions seriously, just like a model of a good girl. If it's in the library, it means there are only 2 of us. So you want to invite me to your house, is it really? Just for me to visit the live studio? Mawei said to Hathaway with interest, as a response to being teased by someone with cuteness just now. However, as soon as he finished asking, Hathaway, who was sitting next to him, suddenly felt a little hot on her face and began to turn red and hot. And for a while, she couldn't say anything and could only stammer. Obviously, she understood what someone meant. This is not like that. I really just, I'll invite you to come and take a look. Hathaway has never met someone as shameless as Mawei, so it was a bit overwhelming for a while. Okay then. Mawei shrugged casually, and then with the bodyguard opening the door, he and Hathaway walked out of the car and entered the apartment that someone shared with her bestie. When Hathaway took the key and opened the door, Mawei, who was standing next to her, smelled a very nice fragrance coming from the living room. The objects and furnishings in the room were very much like those of a female college student, with a youthful and cute style. Put on slippers. Hathaway took out a pair of blue cartoon slippers from the shoebox and motioned Mawei to put them on. In order to make it more convenient for Mawei, she deliberately bent down and placed the slippers right in front of someone. However, it was because of this action that the collar of Hathaway's white chiffon shirt swung down a bit. At that moment, the angle made the white silk bra she was wearing today exposed in front of someone. Even the plump hemisphere wrapped in the underwear was accidentally presented in front of someone. Ahem. The sudden appearance of spring light made Maweli quickly and politely look away, not wanting to take any advantage. At this time, Hathaway, who discovered this embarrassing situation, hurriedly covered her chest with her bare hands. Then she got up carefully, and her face became hotter. She saw that Maweli was very gentlemanly and looked away, so she had a better impression of her big boss. Maweli, this is my live broadcast room, and it is also my bedroom. After Maweli put on his slippers, Hathaway took him through the living room, and came to her boudoir. The whole room is pink, occasionally with some white, which is very different from what appears in the live broadcast screen. The plush toys on the bed are neatly arranged, full of the breath of a young girl. The room is pretty good. Is its sound insulation good? Maweli asked Hathaway with a smile. Judging from the expression, it seems that the question is not simply about the sound insulation effect, but something else. Hathaway understood Maweli's smile, so she explained, the sound insulation effect is pretty good. At least when I sang in the room these days, my bestie didn't complain that I disturbed her. Well, Hathaway didn't understand Maweli's expression and meaning, but this also proves her purity. Do you want to sit on the bed and take a rest? I'll turn on the microphone and sing for you. Hathaway didn't forget the reason why she and Maweli made an appointment in the first place. That is, she still had to carefully selected songs that she didn't sing to Maweli. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304, Incomparably Beautiful. Sure. With a beautiful woman singing for him, especially in her boudoir, such a private place, Maweli naturally had no reason to refuse. He sat on the bed with great interest, and then prepared to listen to Hathaway singing 2 songs. But at this moment, Maweli suddenly saw a row of familiar names written on the label of the plush teddy bear at the head of the bed. Then he picked up the plush toy, and held it in his hand, to take a closer look. It would have been fine, if he hadn't looked at it, but it was amazing after seeing it. Hathaway, who noticed Maweli's move, immediately tried to take the teddy bear from Maweli's hand like a little female cat whose tail was stepped on. No, Hathaway said in a delicate voice. However, Maweli reacted quickly, and with just a turn of his hand, he dodged Hathaway's bare hand. Then he squinted his eyes, and took a closer look, and found that his online name Millie Marley Hahn was written on the label of the plush teddy bear. No wonder someone was embarrassed, and ran to stop him. It turned out that she was afraid that these girlish thoughts would be seen by the parties involved. Explain it. So you sleep with the teddy bear named after my online name every day? Maweli deliberately asked. His question made Hathaway, who was standing in front of the bed, blush and bite her lips, not knowing how to answer. In fact, not only the stuffed bear, but also several other toys on the bedside have the name Millie Marley Hahn written on them. It's just that the label is hidden very deeply and someone hasn't found it yet. I don't sleep with it, I just put it there. Hathaway explained in a delicate voice. Don't mention how little woman she looked. Compared with her previous life's Batman Catwoman image, it's completely different. Sure enough, people's personalities will change greatly due to the environment or time. Oh, really? That curly hair on the teddy bear must have been accidentally stained by it? Maweli said, twisting a black hair from the plush toy with his fingers. The degree of curling is really hard to look at tinfoil perm. Ah. Hathaway blushed and hurriedly took the hair from Maweli's hand. This was a big embarrassment. She usually had the habit of sleeping with her legs between her legs. So the evidence of the crime was left on the doll. Maweli smiled and shook his head. Fortunately, he found this evidence in time, otherwise he would not be able to see it clearly. Seeing Hathaway biting her lips and not saying a word, her face was red, like she was drunk. Maweli had to forgive her and change the subject and said to her, "Why are you still standing there? Aren't you going to sing?" "Oh, yes, the song hasn't been sung yet." Hathaway quickly spread her beautiful legs and sat back at the computer desk to choose a song for Maweli. The embarrassing incident just now made her sweat all over. If someone hadn't spared her, Hathaway's chiffon shirt would have become translucent if it continued like this. After calming down again, Hathaway selected a song Pretty Boy by M2M from the computer and then sang in front of the microphone along with the accompaniment. The style and melody of this song are very dreamy and sweet. In 2000, it fascinated many boys and girls. Even in China, this song is very popular. Finally, in order to give back to the fans, the M2M group specially sang the Chinese version of Pretty Boy. The beautiful singing voice, through Hathaway's lips, reached Maweli's ears. This made him suddenly feel nostalgic for the times. For people now, this song is a relatively new song that has been on the market for 2 years. But for the reborn Maweli, it is already an old song from 20 years ago. At that time, he was still a student. He first heard this English song at a classmate's house. But because I didn't have much money at that time, I couldn't buy a Walkman or MP3 to copy the songs. I could only ask my classmates to borrow them when I wanted to listen to songs. 2 people, each using one earphone, could listen to them for a long time. The pace of life at that time was still very slow. Maweli suddenly missed it. In a blink of an eye, a song was finished, and Hathaway quietly looked back at Maweli. He found that he seemed to be trapped in a certain memory. So he stayed aside quietly without disturbing him, waiting for someone to finish thinking about his thoughts. Is the singing not good? After a while, Hathaway tried to ask. No, it's pretty good. It reminds me of something. Maweli said with a smile. Oh, is it a good memory? Hathaway asked curiously. Do you want to know? Maweli couldn't help asking back. Yeah. Hathaway nodded seriously. She really wanted to know Maweli. Then come here, I'll tell you. Maweli, who was sitting on the bed, hooked his finger at Hathaway. Seeing Maweli's moving fingers, Hathaway stood up without thinking much. Then she walked to Maweli. Her fair and slender legs were perfectly presented in front of someone. Her slender and tender arms were naturally placed on both sides. Her beautiful face and bright eyes looked at Maweli closely, giving people a dreamy feeling of beauty beyond description. Come on, tell me. Hathaway looked down at Maweli on the bed. The man in front of her was the dream lover of many women. Then I said. At this time, Maweli stood up, then slowly put his lips to Hathaway's ear, and then said, it's a pretty good memory. After saying that, Hathaway blinked twice in a row, and looked at Maweli. Her rosy and sexy lips opened slightly. The meaning revealed in her eyes seemed to be asking, that's it? A good memory? Then what? She asked Maweli softly. Then, what do you want to know? Maweli looked at Hathaway with a half smile, knowing what kind of question she wanted to ask. It was nothing more than a love story. Hathaway thought about it seriously, and then asked him the truth. Then, I want to know about the song just now. Do you have memories with boys or girls? Of course, with men. Maweli replied with a long tone. He was telling the truth. When he was a student, he listened to the Walkman with his good friends. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Hathaway, who didn't know anything about it, suddenly looked surprised, as if petrified, and her mind went blank in an instant. Man, you are? Hathaway's first reaction was to mistakenly think that Maweli was gay. To put it bluntly, she likes men. Chapter 305 Meeting the man at the top of the food chain. Hathaway kissed Maweli and fell on her bed. Then what happened next was the kind of wonderful thing that men and women are willing to do. When the two were halfway through, Hathaway's best friend suddenly came back from the library. This made the two of them only whisper, suppressing their passion, and then bursting out in the suppression. Whether in the previous life or this life, this was the first time that Maweli had such close contact with a female star. If you want to say what the feeling is, it is not much different from the previous one. But it can fully satisfy a man's desire to conquer. Looking at Hathaway sleeping beside him, Maweli felt the true meaning of life, that is, enjoyment. Since the roommate next door has come back, Maweli needs to be more careful when leaving, so as not to be discovered. As for Hathaway, after sending Maweli out safely, she went to the bathroom to take a shower, wash off the sweat of the two people on their bodies, and by the way, reminisce the exciting feeling just now. Then in the evening, the two met at a nearby hotel again to make the things that were a little regrettable during the day more perfect. Until the end, both of them were exhausted and slept in the soft big bed. Today was a complete success. During the 3 days in New York, Maweli also took time to meet with Bear Grylls from the UK. Yes, Bear Grylls is the Bear Grylls commonly known by domestic netizens. He became famous all over the world for hosting Man vs. Wild on the Discovery Channel in 2006. He is known as the man at the top of the food chain. Carrying thin equipment, he went deep into the most inaccessible areas in the world to show people how to survive. In 2002, Bear was only 28 years old. He had just obtained a bachelor's degree from the University of London and studied in Spain for a period of time. He served in the 21st Special Air Service Regiment of the United Kingdom. He can fight with bare hands, fight in deserts and cold places, have survival skills, medical treatment, parachuting, etc. He is very versatile. And as early as 5 years ago, he climbed the Amadablam peak in the Himalayas and became the youngest climber in the world. The reason why Maweli met Bear was that his V-Guest video website needed a fresh program like Man vs. Wild to stimulate the audience. At present, his V-Guest live broadcast has already made some reputation in the industry, and the daily traffic is also growing wildly. We must take advantage of this momentum to make the video website rise to a level that others cannot surpass. In this way, no matter who the alliance is, Maweli can sit back and watch them fall. In the hotel restaurant, Belle appeared in front of Maweli in a suit. This kind of dress made someone almost unrecognizable. "Hello, Mr. Maweli. It's an honor to meet you." Belle, 28 years old, is still very young, and there are not so many wrinkles and vicissitudes of the sun and rain on his face. "Hello, Mr. Bell, please sit down." Facing the man at the top of the food chain, Maweli suddenly had an illusion that his life was in danger. After all, there is nothing in the world that Bell dares not eat. Generally, you can eat it after removing the head and internal organs. Even his own urine, the kind of food with a foul smell, Bell dares to swallow it. It's really a fierce batch. The audience can only be amazed. "Mr. Maweli, may I ask what kind of cooperation you are looking for me this time?" To join the mercenary group. Bell was born in the British Special Air Service Regiment. His first feeling was that Maweli invited him to join his group. But since he was seriously injured in the back while parachuting in 1996, Bell's combat ability has been much worse than before. "Not a mercenary group, Mr. Bell. Let me get straight to the point. I want to invite you to shoot a wilderness escape program of the type of wild survival. It should not only have thrilling escape plots, but also popular science about survival in the wild. For example, what can be eaten and what cannot be eaten. Of course, in order to give the audience a deeper viewing experience, you have to demonstrate the food in the wilderness in person. For example, eating raw weevil larvae, cow eyeballs left over by lions, fly larvae, that is, live maggots, and squeezing water out of elephant dung to drink, eating tapeworms, centipedes, soft worms, etc. When Maweli was halfway through his words, he almost couldn't continue. These disgusting foods were all eaten by Bell in his previous life. That's why he is known as the man at the top of the food chain. After hearing Maweli's words, Bell, who was sitting in front of him, was actually frightened that, "Mr. Maweli, are you sure that the audience will like to watch such a program? Eating tapeworms and mollusks, I know you can eat them, they are rich in protein." But, Bell showed an embarrassment. In 2002, he seemed not ready to become the most awesome man. He was still a little resistant to the food that Maweli mentioned. After all, who would leave pizza and hamburgers and eat those things? Isn't this a living hell? However, when Bell was hesitant and in a dilemma, Maweli slowly stretched out his right hand, then said to him with 5 fingers open, $5 million US. "Tell me whether you want to bid or not, Mr. Bell. If you don't want to, I can only find someone else to cooperate with." After Maweli finished speaking, the Russian bodyguard beside him directly took out 2 boxes full of US dollars, and a full $5 million US lay quietly inside. The visual impact was like a movie, which made Bear stunned. To be honest, there are many wilderness survival experts. Not only Bear Grylls, but also DE, or Starving D as netizens call him. He can survive in the wilderness without any equipment, even without wearing any clothes, and without a single hair. Talking nonsense when the wind is favorable, and speaking reason when the wind is against him is his survival style. The reason why Starving D is called Starving D is that he can go without food for 3 consecutive days. And he eats the more vigorous and disgusting things. For example, the emerald green snails in the swamp have a strong smell of decay and stench. Even its natural enemies, chickens, ducks, birds, and turtles, probably won't eat this kind of snail, because its wriggling green internal organs are very disgusting at a glance. Seeing that Maweli didn't say much, and just threw money directly, and it was $5 million US. To be honest, Bear was a little tempted. At present, he hasn't found a suitable career for himself. Even if the food Maweli mentioned was disgusting, he would still eat it for the sake of $5 million US. Mr. Maweli, I'm willing to give it a try. When will the filming start? Bell nodded and said to Maweli. He also knew that there were many survival experts around the world, and if he rejected Maweli, there would be no second chance. Chapter 306, leading the Chinese delegation to visit the nuclear submarine. Now, Mr. Bell, you will be shooting a promotional video for the show live soon. The helicopter on the top of the hotel is ready. My team will take you to the Everglades in Florida, where alligators are said to be roaming. Good luck, Maweli said to Bell with a smile. As soon as he finished speaking, Bell, who was sitting in front of him, was stunned. He was still wearing a suit and was about to be sent to the swamps in Florida. The harsh environment there caused an average of more than 60 tourists to die there every year. This, Mr. Maweli, you mean, go now? Bear Grylls also panicked sometimes. He stared at Maweli with wide eyes and felt that the Russian youth in front of him did not seem to be joking. That's right. Now, if you feel that time is too tight, you can enjoy this lunch and then go. Clothing and equipment are ready, including the warm-up of the live broadcast. It will be carried out simultaneously when you get on the helicopter. Mr. Bell, I believe you can do it, Maweli said, and turned and left, leaving a table of delicious food as the last dinner for the man at the top of the food chain. Looking at Maweli's back as he left, Bear Grylls felt like crying, but had no tears. Compared to the brown bears and cheetahs he encountered in the wild, his new boss was a real eater without spitting out bones, ruthless character. After enjoying his last dinner, Bear Grylls, with the assistance, coercion, of Maweli's team, boarded the helicopter on the top floor of the hotel. He went to the Everglades in Florida to meet the alligators there. Fortunately, this filming was just a promotional live broadcast, and it didn't take too long. Just make to escape plots that attract the audience's attention. For example, in order to survive, Bear Grylls live streamed eating maggots in front of the camera. The terrifying scene directly scared more than 3,000 netizens in the live broadcast room. Maweli, the instigator, lay comfortably in the hotel room, watching Bear Grylls pretending to be awesome in an alternative way. By the way, cheer him up and shout 666. In addition to eating maggots live, Bear Grylls also encountered a small alligator in the swamp. Then he was killed by him with his bare hands. Seeing this, many netizens could not help but worship him. Then there were awards and barrages. This made Maweli's V-Guest live broadcast more attractive. As a world-class local tyrant, Maweli is really good at it. He spent money to let Bear Grylls live broadcast wilderness survival for him, and the key is that the money can be doubled in the end. It's simply a new level of squandering, and ordinary people really can't do it. After watching Bear Grylls live broadcast promotional video, many netizens shouted, "It's not enough," and want to watch the follow-up content of Wild Survival, including this fierce live video. It was also uploaded to the V-Guest homepage. In just 3 days, more than 120,000 people watched this video. Among them, 45,000 people gave Bear Grylls a loving like. Such a high like ratio directly shows that wilderness survival programs are very popular among netizens. After all, everyone lives in a city surrounded by steel and concrete, lacking the opportunity to get close to nature and wild animals. And pure travel programs can't attract attention. The thrilling escape program can make the audience dizzy and feel interesting. Chairman Mawey, the current daily traffic of our V-Guest live broadcast is almost close to that of V-Guest video. At this rate of development, it should be able to catch up in no more than a month. John, the president of V-Guest company, excitedly reported the results to Mawey. John was very convinced of Mawey, the big boss. At the beginning, he was very decisive not to fight a price acquisition war, but to invest in the construction of video live broadcast that led the new trend. This move was really wonderful. On the other hand, those video broadcasters who were poached by Brick Company and Shotan Company at high prices, now that they have come to the new owner, they have hardly done much and are still doing those old tricks. It is equivalent to not bringing any added value to the company. And Mawey's V-Guest live broadcast, not to mention the daily surge in traffic and advertising fees. Just look at the cruise missiles that the local tyrants on the internet give to the anchors. With a 50% share, the website can make a lot of profit. If it continues to develop in this way, the valuation of VKE Live can easily reach $1 billion US, and the influence of internet celebrities and pan-entertainment effects it brings are unpredictable. Cooperating with Mawey's entertainment company will make his industry chain more complete. The video live broadcast website here is developing in full swing. The Navy of Country Z, which Mawey sent someone to contact, also sent a reply saying that they are very willing to visit Russia. As for the purpose of the visit, it is naturally what Mawey said on the phone, the Russian nuclear submarine. Speaking of nuclear submarines, the Navy of Country Z began to design and build the Type 091 attack nuclear submarine codenamed Long March No. 1 in 1966. The submarine was launched in 1970 and entered service 4 years later, making Country Z the 5th country in the world to have nuclear submarines. However, since the entire process is independent research and development, it is equivalent to crossing the river by feeling the stones. Therefore, the technical data of nuclear submarines still has some gaps with those of military developed countries. For example, the Type 091 attack nuclear submarine has an underwater displacement of 5,500 tons. It is nearly 4,000 tons less than Russia's Akula-class nuclear submarine. As of 2002, Country Z had a total of 5 such attack nuclear submarines. But 8 years ago, Country Z's nuclear submarines confronted the US nuclear submarines on the high seas. However, because the interrogation system was not smart enough, it was countered by the Americans. From this incident, we can understand that the advantage of nuclear submarines does not lie in quantity, but in its core technology. Country Z's existing Han-class nuclear submarines and Zaire-class ballistic missile nuclear submarines are roughly equivalent to the improved version of the first generation of Soviet nuclear submarines. So when Mawey invited the Navy to visit and inspect nuclear submarines in Russia, the Navy of Country Z immediately agreed, and the two sides agreed to meet at the base of the Russian Pacific Fleet. In the past, Russia would rather lease nuclear submarines to India than sell them to Country Z. That's because Russia knows that Country Z has the ability to learn and research related technologies through their nuclear submarines. So it always guards against him. And Mawey, as a Russian who knows the domestic situation very well, knows that there is almost no need to be on guard. Instead of using each other, they can use each other. It is better to sincerely establish international friendship with each other. After all, Country Z is mainly based on Confucianism. Foreigners may not understand what Confucianism is, but Mawey, who has studied Zaha's heir, is very clear about this educational thought. Chapter 307 The world's largest strategic nuclear submarine. When the Z country naval delegation came to the Russian Pacific Fleet base, Mawey and the Russian Navy received the delegation solemnly. Good morning, Mr. Yuan Kamen. We meet again. The Mr. Yuan Kamen he was talking about was the senior naval official who visited the Ukrainian Black Sea shipyard to visit the Varyak aircraft carrier 2 years ago. And during the Ukrainian nuclear destruction crisis, he made a life-saving call to Mawey, which successfully allowed him to help Ukraine and disintegrate the EU's conspiracy. It also made Mawey no more in front of the Russian president. Haha. Hello, Mawey, we haven't seen each other for a year and a half, right? Mr. Yuan Kamen smiled at Mawey heartily. His body is still strong and his spirit is very vigorous. This is a good foundation laid when he was young. The last time the Varyak aircraft carrier was detained by Turkey, their navy owed Mavey a big favor. Now Mavey invited them to visit Russia's nuclear submarines again. It is equivalent to giving them another big gift. This relationship is even better. Yes, Mr. Yuan, it's been almost a year and a half. Time flies. Mavey said with some regret. The two chatted for a long time. The group of Z country naval officers standing behind them were secretly surprised. They didn't expect their superiors to be so talkative. It was the first time they saw a young man chatting for so long. The key is that the two spoke different languages. One spoke Russian and the other spoke Chinese, and a translator was needed to participate in the whole process. Come on, Mavey, let me introduce you. These two are scientists in our nuclear submarine field, Dr. Wang and Dr. Li. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. Since they learned about this visit, they have been so excited that they haven't slept well. In the middle of the chat, Mr. Yuan came and introduced Mavey jokingly. Hello, Dr. Wang. Hello, Dr. Li. Nice to meet you too. Mavey said to the two Z country scientists with a smile. As a poor student in his previous life, he envied the top students in the class. However, after his rebirth, he has come into contact with many top scientists who are even more academically advanced than academic masters. This made someone deeply feel that the world is unpredictable, nothing more than this. Hello, Mr. Mavey, it's an honor to meet you. Just as Mr. Yuan came in said, Dr. Wang and Dr. Li were so excited that they didn't sleep well all night after learning that they could visit and learn about Russia's advanced nuclear submarine technology. After all, who knows the technical strength of Z country's nuclear submarines best? It belongs to the two scientists standing in front of Mavey. They understand the strength of their country's nuclear submarines and the gap between them and the United States and Russia. To put it bluntly, the number of years of backwardness is in the double digits. If you rely on your own research, it will be very hard and uncertain. There are too many detours and too many failures. After a simple emotional connection, Mavey went straight to the point and asked Mr. Yuan came in. Mr. Yuan, the nuclear submarine is ready and is now parked at the port. How about I take you to visit it now? Seeing that Mavey was still so straightforward, Mr. Yuan came in, smiled and nodded. Okay, Mavey, then we'd better obey your order. When old friends meet, many courtesies are omitted. With the tacit consent of the Russian Navy, Mavey led the Z country delegation to the Pacific Fleet Baseport. There are several types of nuclear submarines that Mavey had already arranged. Why is it several, not a few? That's because Mavey and the Russian Navy specially transferred 3 types of Russian ultra-high performance nuclear submarines for the Z country delegation. Mr. Yuan, everyone, the 3 nuclear submarines you see in front of you are the Aquila class attack nuclear submarine, the Oscar class missile nuclear submarine, and the world's largest Typhoon class strategic nuclear submarine. Mavey introduced them to the Z country delegation like a treasure. The Aquila class attack nuclear submarine is the submarine he sold to India at a high price some time ago. The Oscar class missile nuclear submarine was one of the nuclear submarines that launched a surprise attack when Russia and the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force confronted each other on the high seas last year. Even the US 7th Fleet has no confidence in its combination with the Aquila class attack nuclear submarine. After all, it is difficult to detect a nuclear submarine lurking in the deep sea below 400 meters in advance. Unless it surfaces to breathe or launches an attack. That kind of sudden attack is very deadly in war. No country can do anything about it. As for the 941 type Typhoon class strategic nuclear submarine that Mavey introduced at the end, it has an even bigger background. It is a nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine under the Russian Navy. It is also the largest submarine in the world in terms of volume and tonnage. Its onboard weapon is Russia's new submarine-launched ballistic missile P-39. The missile is 16 meters long and 2.4 meters in diameter. It can carry 10 subwarheads and has a range of 8,000 to 10,000 kilometers. For strategic nuclear submarines like this, the Russian Navy later equipped its upgraded submarines with a nuclear torpedo Poseidon, which is faster than heaven, earth and air. The torpedo is 24 meters long and 1.5 meters in diameter. Its maximum underwater speed is 100 km per hour and its range is 10,000 km. It can carry a nuclear warhead with a TNT equivalent of 2 million tons. Once fired, it can set off huge waves and destroy the entire New York. Russia has built a total of 6 behemoths like this. However, due to its high cost and maintenance costs, as of 2017, only one is in service. Needless to say, the remaining 5 have all been refrigerated and sealed. It's a pity. Looking at the 3 most advanced high-performance nuclear submarines in Russia, Mr. Yuan came in, who was standing next to Mavey, as well as the 2 scientists and the senior naval officers from Country Z, all showed moving expressions on their faces. Especially when the super monster with a total length of 172 meters and an underwater displacement of 46,000 tons surfaced. The huge figure of the Typhoon class strategic nuclear submarine shocked many people present and opened their mouths slightly. I deeply felt how terrible the Russian military industry is. Such an exaggerated underwater monster was actually built. This is really a fighting nation. Mr. Mavey, thank you so much for your hospitality this time. The 2 nuclear submarine scientists in the visiting group expressed their gratitude to Mavey with great excitement. These 3 super nuclear submarines of different models are like priceless treasures to them, which cannot be bought with any wealth in the world. Chapter 308 Simulated Battle at Sea. You're welcome. It's just a piece of cake, Mavey said, indicating that the 2 scientists should thank the Russian naval commander standing not far away. Without their permission, no matter how capable Mavey is, it would be impossible to get 3 ultra-high performance nuclear submarines at the same time. Mr. Yuan, in order to give your visiting delegation a better experience, our Russian Navy has specially prepared a simulated battle at sea. Are you interested in watching it? Mavey made an invitation very naturally. This time, the simulated battle at sea is not like the previous one, which was bombarded randomly. Instead, it was a militarized battle, to reflect the actual combat advantages of nuclear submarines. The combat units involved include anti-submarine aircraft, anti-submarine ships, destroyers, and conventional powered submarines used for confrontation. The lineup is very gorgeous. Oh, we are very interested in the simulated battle at sea. Can you briefly introduce it to us, Mavey? Mr. Yuan came in knows how fierce the Russian military exercise is. He witnessed it with his own eyes last time. The joint fleet of Ukraine and Russia sank a battleship with a displacement of 50,000 tons to the bottom of the sea. He still remembers that scene clearly. It was as if he had experienced a naval battle in person, which was unforgettable. Sure, Mr. Yuan, the rules of the battle are very simple. The 3 nuclear submarines in front of you will sink into the deep sea and avoid the search of anti-submarine aircraft, anti-submarine ships, sonar matrices, and sonar buoys. Perfectly ambush the modern class destroyers in the fleet and you will win. Otherwise, you will lose. The simulated battle at sea that Mavey mentioned was very new to the visiting delegation of Country Z. It also allowed them to clearly understand the strength of Russian nuclear submarines. After listening to Mavey's introduction, the 2 scientists standing in front of him, Dr. Wang and Dr. Li, looked at each other with bright eyes. 6 years ago, the 091 attack nuclear submarine they developed confronted the US nuclear submarine in the high seas. In the end, the Americans cooperated with the anti-submarine aircraft to counter the communication, which made the Navy and scientists very embarrassed. Now the simulated battle that Mavey created is exactly the direction of their research efforts. It is to let the nuclear submarine avoid the annoying anti-submarine aircraft, and sonar matrix. Mr. Mavey, we are very much looking forward to the performance of your country's nuclear submarines. Dr. Wang and Dr. Li were talking. The 3 nuclear submarines in the port gradually sank to the sea surface. They will sink into the deep sea below 450 meters and then launch a surprise attack while the opponent is searching for them. Generally, such combat exercises are simulated with electronic simulation equipment. That is to say, whether it hits or not, it will all be displayed in the system. But the battle that Mavey made is obviously not so simple. The reason is that the modern class destroyer, which was marked as an attackable warship at that time, is an old ship that has been retired. It will be driven by an unmanned system and follow the fleet to the designated sea area. then it depends on the level of the battle between the two sides. In the end, the nuclear submarine was discovered first, or it unexpectedly killed the destroyer in seconds. Everything is real guns and live ammunition. Maweli did not tell the representatives of the visiting group this information. Instead, it was kept confidential and allowed them to watch it by themselves at that time. In order to consider the safety of everyone, Maweli specially dispatched the Mi-26 military helicopter for viewing. It has special explosion-proof glass around it, allowing the Z country delegation to clearly see what is happening next. As the helicopter, the huge propeller whistled, Maweli, who was sitting in the cockpit, couldn't help but say to you and Leo beside him, "You and Leo, those ships on the sea are Russian Albatross class anti-submarine ships and Dreadnought class large anti-submarine ships. It is equipped with a Blizzard-type quadruple-mounted box-type anti-submarine missile launcher, which can launch 85R anti-submarine missiles with a range of 55 kilometers." Listening to Maweli's introduction, Mr. Yuan came and nodded with interest. The representatives of the Z country delegation who were also sitting in the cabin also clearly heard what Maweli had just said. Everyone used the same frequency communication headset, earmuffs. It can be soundproof and communicate with each other. Just as Maweli was introducing, dozens of Il-38N anti-submarine aircraft took off from Russia's 1736th Air Force Base, joined the ranks of the Pacific Fleet. They are upgraded models of the Il-38, which can monitor ships within 320 kilometers. In addition, the anti-submarine aircraft is also equipped with new thermal sensors and advanced computer equipment, and the performance of other sensors on board has also been greatly enhanced. Mr. Yuan, there are still 10 nautical miles before we enter the simulated battle area. At that time, the Il-38N anti-submarine aircraft in front of us will begin to throw sonar buoys to the sea surface, including anti-submarine ships traveling under the sea and anti-submarine ships on the sea surface. They will simultaneously turn on the sonar matrix and electronic countermeasure system to search for all suspicious movements under the water. The electronic countermeasure system that Maweli mentioned was the trick that the Americans used to deal with the domestic 091 attack nuclear submarines. At that time, the electronic equipment of other countries was not very advanced. There was no anti-interference function. As Maweli said, when the helicopter flew about 18 kilometers in the air, 1 nautical mile equals 1.8 kilometers. I saw the Il-38N anti-submarine aircraft in front of it began to throw sonar buoys to the sea surface. Then, the special radar on the helicopter showed that the sonar matrix of the Pacific Fleet had also been turned on. It was gradually covering the sea area below. Seeing this situation in front of them, the Z Navy and nuclear submarine scientists in the cabin discussed with each other. Russia's Oscar-class missile nuclear submarine can dive to a depth of 500 meters. The 971 type attack nuclear submarine can dive to a depth of 600 meters. But due to the limited range of simulated operations, it is generally more advantageous for the anti-submarine fleet. As long as the fleet does not rush in rashly and conducts a careful carpet search under the water, it is believed that it will be difficult for the nuclear submarine to launch an attack on the destroyer. Just as everyone was discussing this in a low voice, suddenly, the radar showed that 3 anti-ship missiles were attacking the modern class destroyer marked as attackable at a very fast speed. Everything happened so fast that the Fearless class anti-submarine ships and Albatross class anti-submarine ships guarding the destroyer at a safe distance did not even have time to react. There was no time to launch anti-missile missiles to intercept them. The representatives of the visiting delegation from country Z who saw this were all surprised. They didn't know how the nuclear submarine under the water could avoid the sonar matrix search and suddenly launch an attack. Chapter 309 The Frightened Delegation. Koreans also want to buy nuclear submarines. Moreover, the 3 anti-ship missiles on the radar were simulated very realistically. Whether it was the trajectory or the launch direction, they were restored quite realistically. Seeing this, the representatives of the delegation could not help but marvel at it. They thought that the simulation system of the Russian Navy was really good. If they could buy it back and equip their own navy, the combat exercises would be more realistic. However, just when the representatives of the delegation were thinking this way, a violent series of explosions With the force of thunder and lightning, it suddenly exploded on the sea surface. And the direction of the explosion was exactly the modern class destroyer marked as attackable. Boom. 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 The surging waves, with the impact of the explosion, ruthlessly exploded on both sides of the destroyer. The modern class destroyer with a full load displacement of 8,000 tons was violently shaken on the sea surface. The representatives of the Z country delegation sitting in the cabin looked at the scene in shock. Obviously, their minds were blanked by the sudden explosion. What happened? An explosion? A real anti-ship missile? No way. There should be someone on this destroyer? Is this a major mistake? The uninformed delegation representatives were stunned in the cabin. They originally thought that this naval battle in Russia was conducted under electronic simulation. But they never expected that the Russian Navy would be so fierce. This is a real explosion. Do you have to play so hard? Considering the doubts in everyone's hearts, Mavey answered directly in the communication equipment. Please rest assured, the modern class destroyer that just exploded is a warship that has been retired by the Russian Navy. The navigation of the ship is controlled by an unmanned naval navigation system, and there are no crew members on it. Mavey said in a faint tone in the communication equipment. Hearing this, the delegation representatives present couldn't help but shake their heads and sigh. The Russian Navy is playing so hard. What if the missile is launched strong and hits the anti-submarine ships in the distance? That would be a major military accident. Because they knew the rules of the battle in advance, the anti-submarine ships guarding the destroyer kept a fairly safe distance. If the anti-ship missiles of nuclear submarines can be shot off target at this distance, then Mavey would like to say, let them destroy the Russian nation. When they launch torpedoes or even main battleship guns, they will not be shot off target like this. If the guided missiles of Russian submarines make such a fool of themselves, they will definitely be made a laughingstock by people all over the world. Fortunately, this is almost impossible. Mr. Mavey, this military combat exercise of your navy is really wonderful. May I ask how your nuclear submarines can avoid such a dense sonar matrix and then carry out precision strikes? The two scientists in the delegation asked Mavey in amazement. In addition to inheriting the high speed and ultra-large shallow depth of Soviet submarines, Russia's nuclear submarines also pay special attention to stealth and noise reduction technology, which can be immune to sonar searches to a certain extent, becoming a powerful weapon to deter the navies of various countries. The British Defense Secretary once publicly admitted that the nuclear submarines of the Russian Navy were able to attack the British Royal Navy without the knowledge of the British Royal Navy. Dive into some key areas of British waters and deploy sonar buoys to monitor important hydrological information and the activities of the British naval fleet. And this phenomenon has happened more than once. The British Royal Navy has no way to deal with this unless they can upgrade the underwater monitoring system. Otherwise, they can only let the Russians play with it. Drive Wang, Dr. Lee, if you don't mind, I will arrange for our submarine scientists to discuss some issues about nuclear submarines with you later, Mavey said with a smile. Compared with the others who talked over there, they talked about some surface data. It is better to arrange for scientists from the two countries to meet. In this way, the scope of the discussion will be more in-depth. After hearing what Mavey said, Dr. Wang and Dr. Lee standing in front of him suddenly blinked twice with a happy expression. Really? Mr. Mavey, that's great. We have many questions about your country's submarines. Mavey's arrangement is equivalent to giving country Z a gift. Just like the Varyak aircraft carrier, scientists were secretly arranged to go to domestic shipyards to help them design and develop conventional powered aircraft carriers. This is equivalent to giving the Chinese people advanced experience. Let them grow rapidly in the alliance relationship. After sending off the visiting delegation from country Z, Mavey was at ease and waited for the other party's reply. There is no reason not to have such an important strategic armament as a nuclear submarine. However, while waiting for the reply, Russia's neighbor South Korea suddenly sent someone to contact the Pacific Fleet, saying that it was interested in purchasing their attack nuclear submarines, and it would be more expensive than the price offered by the Indians. Mr. Mavey, the South Korean government is willing to pay $3.15 billion to buy the Type 971 attack nuclear submarine from us. Do you think we should do this deal? The Pacific Fleet officer asked Mawei on the phone. Before this, the Koreans learned that India spent $2.8 billion to successfully buy the Type 971 nuclear submarine from the Russian Navy. So they are rich and powerful and are willing to pay an extra $350 million to make this deal with Russia. I know that they still have a lot of nuclear submarines that need to be traded. Last year in Ukraine, the South Korean representatives competed with Russia for the Ulyanovsk nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. In the end, thanks to Mawei, they were able to escape danger. Now, the shameless Koreans, relying on their wealth and a try-and-see attitude, ask the Russian military if they are willing to sell nuclear submarines. If they are willing, they can buy the submarines back and study them on their own. Vigorously develop their own submarine technology. Then use these to deal with neighboring countries. It's a good plan. It's to make a fuss about the fact that the Russian government is short of money. $3.15 billion? Such a good opportunity. I think it can be done. Mawei thought about it and answered on the phone. Since the Koreans want to give them money, there is no reason to refuse. However, the core equipment and core technology of the Type 971 nuclear submarine need to be dismantled before the transaction. This way, the Koreans will not be able to steal our skills. They will not use our technology to challenge us. Mawei showed his true colors as a profiteer and directly told the Pacific Fleet officer a very damaging trick. Chapter 310 Mawei's plan to dismantle the nuclear reactor. This will ensure that the transaction is completed and a large amount of US dollars can be earned. It will also prevent the Koreans from learning from it, secretly strengthening their own strength, and then confronting Russia. However, this transaction needs to be negotiated by professionals. After all, Koreans are not fools. If you want to fool them, you need to have perfect skills. And there are not many people in the Russian Navy who have such skills. Mawei is one of the best. Then Mr. Mawei, may I ask if you are free next week? When we make an appointment with the Koreans, we will contact you. The Pacific Fleet officer immediately understood what Mawei meant. This trick of cutting off the firewood from the bottom of the pot is really hard for ordinary people to think of. South Korea wants to come to Russia to take advantage, but there is no way. Although there are indeed several nuclear submarines of the Russian Navy that want to be sold for cash, replaced with frigates, destroyers, or develop more advanced nuclear submarines. But the seller will definitely not be South Korea, because Koreans are different from Chinese. Koreans have a typical small country mentality, bullying the weak, and only have interests in their rise. Now the relationship is harmonious. Maybe the next moment they will turn their faces and not recognize people. There is no friendship with Chinese people. Sure, I will definitely attend when the time comes. For the fat sheep that comes to the door automatically, Mawei has no reason not to share a piece of the pie. It depends on whether the Koreans will be fooled. Anyway, if they are cheated, Mawei will not leave any handle for the Koreans to bite back. At that time, it will be written in black and white. Even if it goes to the United Nations, it will be useless. A week later, the representative of the South Korean Ministry of Defense, Lu Yuanji, flew to Russia for a visit. Lu Yuanji expressed full confidence in this visit to Russia, because through their detailed analysis, it is difficult to find a buyer to buy all the nuclear submarines in the hands of the four major fleets of Russia. Unless they are retired and eliminated in advance, the annual maintenance cost. That is quite high. Judging from Russia's current GDP, it is difficult for the military to afford this batch of nuclear submarines. Instead of spending so much money, it is better to cultivate the strength of maritime ships. Many Russian ships in service have long been rusted due to disrepair. Even if Mawei helps the government to get these deals, the situation has only improved partially. Military supplies and military expenditures are a bottomless pit. Russia is such a big country, and it really burns a lot of money. When the South Korean representative came to the Pacific Fleet and saw Mawei, he took the initiative to shake hands with him and said hello, Mr. Mawei, I have heard of you for a long time. Lu Yuanji, who has single eyelids and small eyes, had done homework on Mawei before coming to Russia. The Korean people may not know, but as a senior official of the Ministry of National Defense, he clearly knows about the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier transaction with Ukraine. It was Mavey who interfered and set them up. This time, we must get back the losses and face we suffered before. Hello, Mr. Liu Yuanji. As the saying goes, you should not hit a smiling person. Although Mavey has never had a good impression of Koreans, he still has to do some superficial work to avoid being told by the other party that Russians are impolite. Mr. Mavey, this is not the first time you have dealt with us South Korea. I will say something directly. The South Korean government is willing to pay $3.15 billion to purchase your country's Type 971 attack nuclear submarine. It is $350 million more than the Indian side. This price is already very sincere. Liu Yuanji is a head shorter than Mavey. Whether shaking hands or talking, he has to look up at Mavey. But there is confidence in his eyes. Because he knows the economic situation of Russia and needs this money. Even if Russia refuses his proposal to save face, they will not lose anything in this negotiation. It's nothing more than coming here to give it a try. $3.15 billion is too little. It can't be done. Mavey answered very briefly. He made a fuss about the price in order to make the South Korean representatives focus on bargaining instead of anything else. $3.15 billion. Is it still too little? Mr. Mavey, how much is your government willing to pay for the deal? Liu Yuanji asked Mavey with a smile. If they want money, South Korea has the ability to do so. Sure enough, the Russian side is willing to accept the invitation for this negotiation, which means that they are willing to sell nuclear submarines. Otherwise, they will not even talk. At least $4 billion, otherwise no talk. Mavey still answered simply and efficiently. From his point of view, it is just a matter of convenience to cheat South Korea. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, forget it. It's a Buddhist negotiation, and those who are willing will take the bait. $4 billion? This is a bit too lacking in sincerity, isn't it, Mr. Mavey? Your country only sold $2.8 billion to India. With $4 billion, South Korea can buy a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Liu Yuanji said with an exaggerated expression. The amount of $4 billion exceeds the budget of the South Korean Ministry of Defense. They can only pay $3.4 billion or $3.5 billion for the purchase of nuclear submarines. More than that is a bit too much. This price is not something I can decide. The higher-ups have ordered it to be based on this amount. If your country thinks it's too expensive, then I can't do anything about it. Mavey said as a matter of course. His acting skills can be said to be perfect. Even if he plays a role in a movie, it is not a problem. Mr. Mavey, you must know that our Korean government will not be a sucker and pay $4 billion. Then may I ask, what is the purpose of your country arranging this negotiation? There is almost no need to talk about this. Liu Yuanji asked Mavey with a hint of annoyance. He couldn't figure out how the Russians did things. They called people from a far distance and finally scared them away with a super high price. Isn't this just playing a joke on people? Then there is no need to talk. I just happen to have something to do. Excuse me. After Mavey finished speaking, he walked straight away without looking back. The Korean delegation standing in front of them was very embarrassed and speechless. They have had contacts with many countries, but no country is like Russia, where they don't talk much. They are too lazy to even do the superficial work in the end. It's really reckless. In fact, what they don't know is that this is all within someone's expectations. The reason why they use a high price to reject South Korea's purchase request. That's because his Russian Navy has 2 nuclear submarines that are about to be decommissioned and will be abandoned in a warship graveyard, a seaport dedicated to parking retired warships and then letting the warships be corroded by seawater. The nuclear reactors of these 2 retired nuclear submarines need to be dismantled. The treatment of nuclear reactors requires extremely complex processes and technologies. All of these require a considerable amount of funds and a lot of manpower and material resources to achieve. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311. Mavey plays a big game. Before shutting down the reactor, it will take at least 3 years of cooling time, and then the hull above the reactor and the top shielding layer will be removed. The fuel element will be transported to a special storage location by ship train. The whole process is time consuming and costly. So Mavey's plan is to find a way to get the Koreans to pay. The 2 nuclear submarines that are about to be decommissioned will be given to South Korea for independent research at a discount. Of course, some key equipment and technology, Russian engineers will definitely dismantle them in advance. From Mavey's own standpoint, the role he plays is to block the way for the Koreans, then arrange for an official to reveal the 2 retired nuclear submarines to the Koreans at a very appropriate time. Next, it depends on whether the Koreans will be tempted by greed. In the end, they will help Russia solve this nuclear disposal problem. Seeing that Mavey actually received foreign guests in this way, the Korean representative Liu Yuanji felt very disrespected. So he immediately called and protested to the Korean embassy in Russia. All of Mavey's bad behavior was set out. The Russian government said that they would never sell nuclear submarines without $4 billion. Such a high price is simply a lion's mouth. If they are like this, why did they ask us to come over for negotiation? Liu Yuanji said angrily on the phone. The director of the Korean embassy on the other end suddenly remembered something and said, "Don't worry, Yuanji, I think I heard from a Russian friend of mine 2 days ago. The Baltic fleet has to attack nuclear submarines that are about to be retired. Due to insufficient funds, the nuclear reactor cannot be dismantled. Do you think, if we send someone to communicate with the Baltic fleet, we may be able to buy what we want at a very low price?" This news about the director of the Korean embassy was spread by Mavey through a special person. Selling nuclear submarines directly to Koreans and then dismantling professional equipment seems to be a bit inappropriate after Mavey's careful consideration. If the Koreans find out in advance, the scene will be very ugly. After all, Russia is mainly engaged in the arms industry. If such a thing of crossing the river and then destroying the bridge spreads to the international community, even if it is clearly written in black and white, it will bring bad reputation to the Russian Navy. At that time, other countries will not dare to do business with him. But retired nuclear submarines are different. This is a business where both sides are willing to fight, and the other side is willing to be beaten. The Koreans wanted to take advantage of small profits and bought retired Russian nuclear submarines to steal technology. In the end, the Russian side dismantled the key equipment in advance. This matter will not affect the arms trade. The Russians cannot be blamed. If you want to blame someone, blame the Koreans. They have bad intentions and wanted to take advantage of Russia. In the end, they were cheated and lost more than they gained. Retired nuclear submarines? How much does it cost to dismantle a nuclear reactor? Liu Yuanji asked with interest. He was holding back his anger at this time and wanted to vent it very much. This was all because of Mavey just now, who made him upset. The cost of dismantling the reactor of a nuclear submarine is about $400 million. 2 submarines is about $800 million. If the price of retired nuclear submarines is included, it should be around $2.5 billion. The director of the Korean embassy said on the phone. Spending $2.5 billion to buy Russia's nuclear submarine technology that is not disclosed to the public is a very good investment. After all, this technology cannot be bought anywhere else. The Koreans made a good calculation, but they did not know that they were stepping into someone's chess game step by step and gradually becoming a pawn. In the next few days, the South Korean Ministry of Defense visited the Russian Baltic Fleet. The person in charge of receiving everyone was the Naval Vice Admiral, Samnovs, who had already communicated with Mavey. Vice Admiral Samnovs, it's nice to meet you. I heard that your fleet has 2 nuclear submarines that are about to be retired and need to dismantle the nuclear reactors. Maybe we can help your fleet with this favor. After some greetings, the South Korean representative Liu Yuanji said enthusiastically to the Russian Vice Admiral, "Why are you so kind? Do you want to help me all of a sudden?" Lieutenant General Samnovs asked on the spot with some doubts. Before that, he had already talked to Mavey on the phone and knew what the Koreans were up to. So all the questions he asked just now were deliberately performed according to someone's request. The purpose was to make the Koreans think that their cleverness had succeeded. It's like this, Lieutenant General Sam nods. Since Russia and South Korea are close to each other, if your country is unable to dismantle the submarine nuclear reactor due to financial problems, it will eventually lead to something like Chernobyl and nuclear leakage. We South Korea will also suffer. The economic losses caused by that time will be very serious. So I propose, Lieutenant General, why don't your government sell these 2 nuclear submarines that are about to be retired to South Korea? As for the cost of dismantling the nuclear reactor, South Korea will also bear it. What do you think? Liu Yuanji asked with a suggestion. From his point of view, Russia's retired nuclear submarines are also a very troublesome problem for the Navy. If they are dismantled, the cost is too expensive. If they are not dismantled, nuclear leakage accidents may occur at any minute. The harm caused by this is even greater. Not only will the sea be polluted, but the Russian government will have to clean up the mess in the end, consuming a lot of manpower and material resources. I'm afraid I have to ask my superiors for instructions on this, so I can't give you an answer right away. Lieutenant General Samnovs replied thoughtfully. No problem, Lieutenant General. Hearing that the other party seemed to be a little moved, Liu Yuanji felt that there was a play and said obediently. At this time, Lieutenant General Samnovs pretended to take the phone from the guard, then walked away and dialed someone's mobile phone. Hello, Mr. Mawei, the plan is going very smoothly. The Koreans said they would help us deal with the nuclear reactor, and they will bear all the expenses. Lieutenant General Samnov said to Mawei with admiration. The development of the incident was exactly as Mawei expected. Even the rhetoric was very different, which was really amazing. In fact, this was not because Mawei predicted it accurately, but because history is always surprisingly similar. In the previous life, South Korea bought their abandoned aircraft carriers from Russia, Minsk and Novorossiysk. On the surface, South Korea purchased the aircraft carriers in the name of protecting the marine environment and supporting its neighbor economically. But Russia is not stupid. It knows that South Korea has long wanted to own an aircraft carrier. They hope to dismantle the 2 aircraft carriers for research and lay the foundation for their own aircraft carrier business. Therefore, before the sale, the key equipment was completely dismantled, and even some of the aircraft carrier's structures were destroyed. Chapter 312 Nuclear Submarine Transaction goes smoothly. Okay, Lieutenant General Samnovs, let them take care of it, Mawei said in a light tone on the phone. As for whether the Koreans can handle the nuclear reactor well, Mawei knew that they probably could, because as early as the 1970s, South Korea had developed atomic weapons with France and made great progress. According to the recollections of the Blue House secretary, the government departments at that time expected that South Korea could test the first atomic bomb in 1983. However, after the death of the South Korean president, the new rulers terminated all research plans related to nuclear weapons under international pressure. So although South Korea does not have atomic weapons, they still have the technology to dismantle nuclear reactors, based on their research with the French. Even if it really doesn't work, they can ask France or the United States for help, and they will help. After all, in the spirit of humanitarianism, nuclear leakage concerns the whole world, and it is not a joke. Okay, Mr. Mawei, I understand. Lieutenant General Samnovs, after talking to Mawei on the phone, pretending to follow the superior's arrangement, he came to the Korean delegation and said, Mr. Liu Yuanji, Admiral Andres of our Baltic Fleet, is very interested in your country's proposal, so he will arrange time to meet with you. The play must be done in full, so that the Koreans will believe it. After listening to the words of the Vice Admiral, Liu Yuanji and other Korean representatives couldn't help but look at each other. There was a hint of joy in their eyes. Okay, Vice Admiral Samnovs, it is our honor to meet with Admiral Andres, Liu Yuanji said with a smile. So 20 minutes later, Admiral Andres, the big boss in Mawei's plan, came on stage. And after a detailed discussion that lasted for 2 weeks, the Russian Baltic Fleet finally sold their 2 retired Type 971 attack nuclear submarines for $1.8 billion. The reason why it is said to be retired is because according to the process, Nuclear submarines need to be retired in advance before the transaction is completed. As for the $800 million for dismantling the nuclear reactor, according to the contract, it will be borne by the South Korean government. This means that the South Koreans spent a total of $2.6 billion to buy 2 super expensive scrap metals from Russia, plus 2 nuclear reactors. That would make any country feel headache. In this life, Russia, under the advice of someone, did not directly dismantle all the nuclear submarine equipment. Instead, it refined it and only dismantled the key core technology. To put it bluntly, the scientific and technological achievements that the Koreans did not have and wanted to study were all selectively dismantled. What was left were nothing more than some ordinary components and intact but useless shells. The advantage of doing this is that Russia would not be noticed by the Koreans when delivering the submarine. I believe that when the Korean scientists boarded the submarine with great interest, they planned to study it carefully. The scene that will appear at that time will definitely make them speechless and their eyeballs will fall out. Mr. Mavey, South Korea has paid us the full amount. Now we are waiting for their semi-submersible ship to come to our base to tow the 2 nuclear submarines back to their country. In return for you, our Baltic fleet has decided to order a modern class destroyer and 6 modern class frigates from your North Sea shipyard. The officer of the Baltic fleet said to Mavey enthusiastically on the phone. A semi-submersible ship, also known as a semi-submersible mothership, adjusts its own ballast water to submerge the cargo deck into the water in order to carry those specific goods, such as drilling platforms and nuclear submarines. I'm afraid that only Mavey, who is so amazing, can think of such a magical operation. If it were them, the Russian Navy, it is estimated that they would reject the Korean proposal at the beginning. Then the 2 retired nuclear submarines would be thrown into the warship graveyard. When they have money, they will dismantle the nuclear reactor. So to sum up, Mavey turned a business that was originally going to lose $800 million into a net profit of $1.8 billion. This in and out is equivalent to bringing a profit of $2.6 billion to the Russian Navy. And it will not affect Russia's reputation. After all, it was the Koreans who came to Russia and said they would help Russia deal with retired nuclear submarines and dismantle nuclear reactors. They were the ones who started the conspiracy and trickery. It's no wonder that Russia took countermeasures later. Okay, Major General, thank you for your support. Mavey thanked him on the phone. This arms business is really easy to do. It not only solves the problem of dismantling nuclear reactors, it also brings orders to its own shipyard. The news that South Korea spent $1.8 billion to buy 2 retired nuclear submarines from the Russian Navy quickly spread. On TV and the internet, many experts, scholars, and military fans have expressed their opinions on this news. For example, a South Korean military expert said excitedly on the show, "We bought these 2 Type 971 attack nuclear submarines from the Russian Navy. It is equivalent to rescuing Russia and helping them through the nuclear leakage crisis. You know, with their economic capabilities, they cannot dismantle the nuclear reactor in a short time. So they should thank us. The Koreans are very hypocritical. Voices like the above are everywhere in South Korea. Their purpose is to promote the government's good deeds. It is not to take advantage of the fire, be greedy for small gains, and steal Russian nuclear submarine technology." Some netizens on the internet couldn't stand the shamelessness of the Koreans. Are the Koreans too shameless? They bought 2 nuclear submarines that are about to be retired from the Russians at such a cheap price. In the end, they still said they were noble. India spent $2.8 billion some time ago. I don't know what Russia thinks. Is this a pie deal with South Korea? It's over. South Korea has nuclear submarines, and they are made in Russia. With the nature of the Korean country, it will definitely be arrogant and show off. It will become the 6th country in the world to have nuclear submarines. Moreover, they bought nuclear submarines back and then secretly learned the technology inside to develop their own military industry. The $1.8 billion is really worth it. Whether it is the opinions of those experts and scholars or netizens on the internet, most of them mean that South Korea has made a lot of money this time. With the current level of their country's shipbuilding industry, they lack such a God-given opportunity. And the Russians they are so short of money that they actually resell their country's core technology in disguise. Don't you know that the Koreans are ungrateful? When the time is right, they will definitely bite Russia back. Chapter 313 South Korea wants to pinch Russia. By then, the Russians will regret why they provided them with such a critical opportunity. Looking at the comments of these keyboard warriors on the internet, Mavey, the initiator of the plan, shook his head indifferently. Calculating the time, the 2 nuclear submarines towed back by the Koreans are about to reach their own waters. I don't know what the Koreans will feel by then. Anyway, Russia, have made money. And they also handed this mess to South Korea. Let them be happy. 2 days later, when the Korean semi-submersible ship returned from Russia with glory and honor, the Korean Navy responsible for welcoming them dispatched a large number of frigates and escort boats to escort them and complete the last leg of the journey. The Korean scientists responsible for receiving the submarines have been waiting impatiently at the naval base port. Since the day the news of the transaction came out, Korean scientists have been looking forward to it every day, hoping that the 2 nuclear submarines of Russia can be transported back to South Korea as soon as possible for further research. However, when the 2 nuclear submarines were successfully transported back to the base port, then, Korean scientists boarded the submarine in a group with great enthusiasm. What happened next shocked all the Korean scientists and naval officers present. Why can't these devices be started? It's impossible. What's going on? The Korean submarine engineer in charge of the operation couldn't start the relevant equipment at all. Even the nuclear submarine couldn't even dive. This is really a retired and abandoned nuclear submarine from Russia, no doubt. The Ministry of Defense official in charge of the transaction almost fainted on the spot. $1.8 billion were used to buy 2 nuclear submarines that couldn't even dive. There are 2 nuclear reactors inside, waiting for them to pay to dismantle them. This business is so unprofitable that it's losing money. The key is that they will be ridiculed by people all over the world, especially their neighboring countries, North Korea, Japan, and China, who will definitely report this matter mercilessly. Proclaim to the Chinese people how stupid they are, Koreans. They wanted to take advantage of Russia, but in the end they were defeated. Including the Ulyanovsk nuclear-powered aircraft carrier of Ukraine the year before last, the amount of money that South Korea has been cheated by Russia has reached nearly $8 billion. The nuclear-powered aircraft carrier is expensive, and the delivery time is cheated. And this time the nuclear submarine order is a complete loss of $2.6 billion. How about we wrestle these 2 nuclear submarines to country Z? See if they want it? The South Korean government officials who were forced to do so wanted to divert the trouble to country Z, but obviously this plan is not feasible. After all, they just bought the nuclear submarine, and it would be too obvious to sell it right away. If they want to blame, they can only blame themselves. They are greedy, ambitious, and blinded by a single leaf. They didn't expect Russia to have this trick. It's really cunning. The engineers disassembled all the key equipment. There is no valuable information inside. This is like eating fish without spitting out even the bones. It's so clean that it's scary. The South Korean government, under pressure, finally asked scientists to try to dismantle the nuclear submarine to understand its internal structure. But there is a lot of information about this outside, and even a search on the internet can show a schematic diagram of the structure. Almost on the same day, the South Korean government issued an order to block the news. Not a word about this trap can be revealed to the outside world, and they have to swallow their anger. It is right to block this, but the 2 nuclear submarines are left alone at the base port. These 2 behemoths will inevitably arouse suspicion among naval soldiers and even some ships delivering goods to the base. They wonder if there is something wrong with these 2 nuclear submarines. Otherwise, why are they always parked at the port, not performing tasks, not doing research, etc. People's suspicion is very scary. Even if the government tried its best to block the news, the rumors that the 2 nuclear submarines were scrapped could not help but spread on the internet. For the past 3 weeks, the nuclear submarines that our South Korean Navy bought from Russia have been parked at the base port, motionless. No researchers have been seen entering or leaving. If this continues, I'm afraid they will all be soaked in the seawater. Is there something wrong with the submarines? I also saw those 2 nuclear submarines last week, and it seems that no one cares about them. Is this really a good deed to help Russia solve the nuclear leakage problem? It cost us taxpayers $1.8 billion US. It is said that dismantling the nuclear reactor will cost at least another $800 million US. Do you think our taxpayers have too much money? The above rumors quickly attracted the attention of the South Korean media. Some reporters who were begging for the truth and were not afraid of death sneaked into the naval base with the delivery ship. They also took relevant photos, confirming that the rumors on the internet were not false, but true. Suddenly, a stone stirred up 1,000 waves. The chain reaction triggered by a photo angered many South Korean people who were dissatisfied with the deal. They spontaneously organized marches and demonstrated at the Blue House, demanding an explanation from the government. During the demonstration, there was a conflict with the police, and the situation was out of control. It has to be said that Koreans often hold marches and demonstrations. Even some influential stars have participated in them and demanded a reasonable explanation from the government. In the end, the top leaders of the South Korean government were forced to admit to the outside world that they were cheated by the Russians in this transaction. Citizens of the Republic of Korea, we are very sorry. Due to Russia's failure to keep its promise, our country has suffered a loss of more than $3 billion US. We, South Korea, must get this price back. So we have decided to impose economic sanctions on Russia from today. All commercial trade with Russia will be subject to the strictest control and monitoring. The South Korean government is good at throwing the pot. When it can't take advantage, it avoids the main issue and throws the villain role to Russia. I'm afraid they don't remember who claimed that the purchase of these 2 retired nuclear submarines was to solve environmental problems and provide economic assistance to Russia. Such a selfless and noble reason, but they don't stick to it. This really makes the Russians feel a little chilled. Almost on the same day that the South Korean government issued a statement, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs also responded strongly. The South Korean government wants to impose economic sanctions on us, Russia. If they want to, then go ahead. We, Russia, will never be afraid. There is another point we must make clear, that is, it was the South Koreans themselves who took the initiative to say that they would fund us to solve the problem of dismantling the nuclear reactors of the 2 submarines. This is not that we, Russia, do not keep our promise. Chapter 314, South Korea to conduct military exercises with the French fleet in front of Russia. The remarks and arguments made by the Russian and South Korean governments have directly become the hot searches in various countries. Those keyboard warriors who previously questioned Russia and said that they only wanted to make money but had no brains. After seeing the latest news, they all fell silent and had nothing to say. Anyone with a discerning eye knows that the Koreans have fallen this time. They are being fooled by their own cleverness. Now it seems that they are desperate and will fight with Russia. They want to save face in the economic war. But then again, if South Korea wants to buy intact nuclear submarines, it will definitely check and inspect the goods. But they bought these 2 nuclear submarines in the name of environmental protection and aid, so it is not convenient to send people to check everywhere during the transaction. Otherwise, it would violate their excuse. Poor Koreans, they are so smart. They were fooled by Russia without making a sound. They should blame themselves. Some domestic netizens commented indignantly on the internet. Hahaha, I was so amused by the news. Now we don't have to worry about South Korea stealing nuclear submarines. Russia did a great job. Is South Korea going to turn its back on us? Some time ago, they said they would help Russia solve environmental pollution problems. Now they have dismantled the key technology of nuclear submarines, and they say they were cheated. The whole world has to agree with them. There are still many reasonable people among netizens. Many people stand on the side of Russia and praise them for doing a great job. After receiving a tough response from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the furious South Korean government actually imposed retaliatory tariffs on imported food and goods from Russia, and also expelled 3 Russian diplomats in South Korea. Russia also immediately responded by increasing tariffs on South Korean goods by 25%. And expelled 5 South Korean diplomats in Russia. The conflict between the 2 countries is getting more and more intense. Even the South Koreans dug up old accounts, saying that during the Soviet era, their 2 civil airliners were shot down by the Soviets. The Soviet Union has not paid the compensation so far, and has not even apologized. So Russia should be responsible. The conflict between Russia and South Korea is becoming more and more intense. The source of the conflict is that Mavey, the instigator, is one of the troublemakers. If he had not cheated South Korea of $8 billion in a row, the South Koreans would not have torn their faces and wanted to pinch Russia. But then again, in both transactions, it was the South Koreans who took the initiative to provoke. In the case of the Ulyanovsk nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, they were instructed by the European Union to maliciously compete with Russia. And this time, the nuclear submarine was their ambition, to take advantage of Russia. 5 days later, Mavey, who was lying at home and concerned about current affairs, suddenly received a call from the president of his energy company. Chairman Mavey, there is something I want to report to you. That is, our 2 cargo ships transporting oil were intercepted by the South Korean fleet on the high seas. The other party said that we violated their waters, and now all the people and ships have been detained. God has a good turn of events, and the heavens will not let anyone get away. Things have gone around, and finally fell on Mavey's head. This is all someone's sin. How many of our employees are there on the ship? Mavey immediately sat up and asked on the phone. There are 56 crew members and 4,180 tons of oil. Chairman Mavey, the 2 oil tankers were seized by the fleet ambushed in the waters near South Korea when they passed through. South Koreans have no advantage in economic warfare. Russia doubled the method of expelling diplomats. So they had a worse mind and sent a fleet to intercept several Russian cargo ships and fishing boats. Among them was a large oil tanker of Mavey Group. I know, I will deal with this matter. As the saying goes, when you are at home, trouble comes from the sky. Mavey deeply understands the artistic conception of this sentence. Russia's 2 neighboring countries, South Korea and Japan, always like to have friction with nearby countries. After ending the call with his subordinates, Mavey immediately called the Russian defense minister. Hello, minister, it's me, Mavey. I'm afraid I have to trouble you with something. 2 oil tankers of my group were taken by the South Korean Navy today. Raised troops for 1,000 days and use them in one moment. Only when you encounter trouble can you truly reflect Mavey's layout and investment. Mavey, don't worry, we have sent people to deal with this matter. We have also informed the president of this matter. I believe that there will be actions against South Korea soon. The Russian defense minister said to comfort Mavey on the phone. The Koreans are really ambitious. Last year, Russia just dealt with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force. In less than a year, they came to provoke again. It really forced the Russian Empire to take action. The news that Russian cargo ships and fishing boats were seized by the South Korean Navy soon reached the Kremlin. Upon learning of this, the Russian president immediately shouted angrily to the South Korean government, demanding that they release the Russian citizens and ships that were detained without reason. This barbaric act of the South Korean government is extremely bad. Now my Russian government has sent an ultimatum to South Korea. If the detained Russian citizens and ships are not returned to our country in time, then Russia will take special measures against South Korea. The Russian president announced to the outside world in front of all the reporters. This time, the 2 countries did not send diplomats to negotiate the conflict with courtesy first and then force. That's because the Koreans expelled Russian diplomats. So there's nothing to talk about. Let's have a head-on confrontation. Let's see who will give in the end. Anyway, Russia will definitely fight to the end. As the saying goes, what you say is what you say. After issuing an ultimatum to South Korea, 2 modern-class destroyers, 6 Grisha-class frigates, and an Oscar-class missile nuclear submarine were immediately deployed near the Korean waters as a deterrent to the South Korean government. At the same time, the Russian military also followed suit, arresting suspicious Koreans in the country and detaining Korean fishing boats and cargo ships that attempted to invade Russian waters. However, because the Korean side was on guard in advance, not many people were caught. It's far less severe than what they detained. The situation between the 2 countries can already be said to be very tense. However, at this time, South Korea suddenly announced that it would hold a joint military exercise with the Pacific Fleet and the Far East Fleet of the French Navy in the Far East waters a week later. The purpose is naturally needless to say, in order to put pressure on Russia and show that they are not afraid of South Korea. No wonder they dared to do that. It turned out that they had the support of France. Speaking of the French Navy, its strength should not be underestimated. Chapter 315. The arrival of the French fleet will bring unrest to the Far East. They have Triumphant class strategic nuclear submarines with an underwater displacement of 14,000 tons, which can carry 16-51 submarine launched missiles. Rubis class attack nuclear submarines with an underwater displacement of 2,660 tons. Barracuda class attack nuclear submarines with an underwater displacement of 5,300 tons. In addition to nuclear submarines, France also has an aircraft carrier with a displacement of 42,500 tons, the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier. In the parallel world, it is a conventionally powered aircraft carrier, not a nuclear powered one in the previous life. In terms of combat power, it can carry 40 aircraft of various types, equipped with 4 X-8 mounted Aster air defense missiles and 2 X-6 mounted French Mistral air defense missiles. It is a symbol of the French Navy's facade. Whether in this life or the last, Koreans are exactly the same. In the previous life, they were bullied and went to their big brother, the United States, for joint military exercises. In this life, they embraced the EU's thighs and went to the French for joint military exercises to challenge Russia. But then again, the reason why South Korea can have such a tough attitude this time is inseparable from France. If there was no secret support from the French, Mawei would never believe it. Hearing that South Korea was going to hold a joint military exercise with the French Navy in front of his home, the Russian president, who was still angry, became even more angry. Immediately connect me to the Pacific Fleet and the Far East Regional Command. We can't let the Koreans and the French mess around at the doorstep of our Russian Federation. The Russian president said to his staff without hesitation, while his subordinates were connecting to the Pacific Fleet and the Far East Regional Command. The Russian president suddenly shook his head again and said to himself, "This Mawei is really causing trouble for me." For the Russian president, the appearance of Mawei not only helped him solve some of the financial problems, but also injected a fresh vitality into Russia's economy and employment environment. Mavey Group has been undergoing structural adjustments in the past 2 years, focusing on Russia and country Z. But at the same time, Mawei has also caused a lot of trouble. In the past 2 years, 8 out of 10 major events that Russia has experienced are related to Mawei. For example, the Varyak aircraft carrier seized by Turkey, the crew intercepted by the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, and the fighter jet shot down by the Afghan Al-Qaeda. And this time, South Korea and France openly challenged Russia in front of the country. With so many outstanding military exploits and troublemaking records, Mawei has become similar to a certain primary school student who causes casualties wherever he goes. A real troublemaker. Mr. President, the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet and the Far East Command is online and can be called at any time. The staff officer said to the Russian president. "Okay, help me connect." After the Russian president finished speaking, he picked up the phone in front of his desk and took the next step to deal with the escalating situation. At present, his Russian military has been greatly improved with the help of a certain troublemaker. Not only has it ordered a new type of nuclear-powered aircraft carrier from the Black Sea shipyard in Ukraine, and even those nuclear submarines that are about to become a burden have also been partially solved. In addition, the Russian Navy is building a modern class destroyer and a new modern class frigate. The modified ultra-long-range rocket launcher, medium and long-range ballistic missiles, and 4th generation fighters are under development. They are all in the process of research and development and production. It just takes some time to break out of the cocoon and become a butterfly. So now Russia is in this transformation process. How to deal with the joint fleet of France and South Korea requires long-term planning. It is best to solve it without consuming a lot of manpower and material resources. The last time against the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, although Russia won a great victory, but that was thanks to the sufficient time given to the 4 major fleets to withdraw ships and rush to the Sea of Japan in time. This time, South Korea and France deliberately played a time difference, knowing that in just 1 week, Russia would not have time to withdraw warships and rush to the Far East. In this way, they have a great advantage. The news that the Koreans and French were going to hold a joint maritime military exercise in the Far East, that is, at the doorstep of Russia, soon spread to countries around the world. For this escalated game, each country has a different view. First of all, most of the Korean people support this. After all, new and old grudges have never dared to seek revenge from Russia. At the beginning, 2 passenger planes were destroyed by former Soviet fighters, killing more than 400 Koreans. The government dared not even say a word. If it continues to be so cowardly, the Republic of Korea might as well change its name to the Republic of Cowards. I support the government's actions to let the Russians know how powerful we are. Our economy is so far ahead of theirs that we can wear them down, even if we have to fight. A South Korean citizen left an angry message online. Are the Koreans going to fight the Russians? They even asked the French for support. They really know how to find a backer. It is said that the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle has already been deployed to the Sea of Japan. I wonder if little Japan will join in. These are the comments and messages of domestic netizens. Japan, because it was taught a lesson by Russia last year, will not participate in this armed confrontation, and there is no reason for them to participate. As for the French aircraft carrier battle group Charles de Gaulle, it has indeed approached the Sea of Japan. In addition to a 42,500-ton aircraft carrier, the French also sent a 32,300-ton full-load displacement amphibious assault ship, the Reborn, 4 Ubis-class attack nuclear submarines, 6 Lafayette-class frigates, 3 Aquitaine-class destroyers with a full-load displacement of 6,050 tons, equipped with 8 unit Exocet anti-ship missiles, Storm Shadow cruise missiles, 16 ASTA-15 short-range air defense missiles, and 2 6-piece Mu-90 torpedoes. The Thunderbolt amphibious assault ship is the main force of the French Navy's amphibious operations and ocean delivery. This class of ships can carry more than 16 NH-90 helicopters or Tiger armed helicopters, and more than 70 vehicles, including the carrying/maintenance space for 13 main battle tanks, and the ship also contains the carrying space for 900 marines. This modern aircraft carrier battle group is very powerful and can bully many countries. But there is a fatal flaw, that is, insufficient air defense capabilities. At present France's small attack nuclear submarines are not prepared for ocean decisive battles. Therefore, its air defense capabilities are not even as good as the Queen's battle group with a full complement of Type 45 destroyers. A week passed quickly, and it was the day of the joint military exercise between the French Navy and the South Korean Navy. As the initiator of the military exercise, the South Korean fleet will naturally be large in number. South Korea claims that its navy ranks 5th in the world because of its rapid economic growth. Since the 1980s, 6 of the world's top 10 shipyards were South Korean. Chapter 316. A war at sea is about to begin. Therefore, its ships are constantly developing towards large scale and ocean-going. Self-confidence is also constantly expanding. Most Koreans always think that their naval strength is second only to the United States, Japan, France, and Russia. As for the United Kingdom and Country Z, they do not even have aircraft carriers at present, 2002, and the number of large and medium-sized surface ships is also less than theirs. The total number of the South Korean Navy is about 35,000. The military exercise team is equipped with 1 Dokdo-class amphibious assault ship, 1 Gu-Falcon Peak-class tank landing ship, 2 KDX-2-class Aegis destroyers, Yi Sun-sin, 3 KDX-1-class destroyers, 5 Incheon-class FFX-1 frigates, and 6 Ulsan-class frigates. Among them, the Dokdo-class amphibious assault ship was launched and put into service in 2005 in the previous life. But in this life, with the support of the French, South Korea's research and development is very rapid. At 3 p.m., when the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, with amphibious assault ships, Aquitaine-class destroyers, Lafayette-class frigates, and Rubis-class attack nuclear submarines, appeared in the Far East waters, the Dokdo-class amphibious assault ships, Lone Falcon Peak-class tank landing ships, and KDX-2-class Aegis destroyer groups sailed out of the South Korean naval base, and also joined the French fleet in the Far East waters. This super combined fleet, with a total size of more than 40 ships, once it joined together, occupied a large area of the sea. The scale is very spectacular, as if the entire sea surface will be flattened by them. Such a scene naturally attracted war correspondents from all over the world. They took a special helicopter with cameras to capture as much of this scene as possible. Compared to the military exercise of the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force last year, the scale of this joint exercise between South Korea and France is nearly doubled. Even the aircraft carrier battle group was dispatched. I really don't know what kind of response Russia will make. A reporter who participated in the filming of the Russian-Japanese maritime confrontation last year asked his companion curiously. Last year, the Russian Navy urgently dispatched the Kuznetsov aircraft carrier battle group. Then it cooperated with nuclear submarines and Tu-95 strategic bombers to scare off the Japanese Navy. South Korea and France will probably learn from Japan's lessons and take more precautions in the air and underwater units, right? Most of the war correspondents are half military experts, and their analysis is not wrong at all. This time, the joint fleet of South Korea and France has already taken sufficient precautions and targeted measures against Russia's Tu-95 and Tu-160 supersonic bombers, as well as attack and missile nuclear submarines. That is to send more fighters to be on standby nearby at any time. Increase underwater combat units and use France's Rubis-class attack nuclear submarines to fight against Russia's Type 971 nuclear submarines. We must completely overwhelm the other side in terms of momentum and strength. Give the Russians a deep impression. Look. It seems to be the Russian fleet in front, the Kuznetsov aircraft carrier battle group. The war correspondents on the helicopter looked at the sea in the distance with binoculars. There is a conventional powered aircraft carrier with a black body, carrying 3 modern class destroyers and 6 Grisha-class frigates. It is heading towards the direction of the North Korean, South Korean and French joint fleets. The Koreans and the French are going to conduct joint military exercises. Of course, Russia also wants to join in the fun and come to participate. However, the exercise areas of both sides are different. The sea areas that are blocked in advance and prohibited from passing are also different. Seeing the Russian fleet, there are only a pitiful 10 warships. The South Korean and French joint fleets, which are 4 times the number of them, are immediately completely superior to Russia in momentum. Let the underwater troops go to the sea ahead to scout and see if the Russian nuclear submarines are ambushing there. Also, let the Air Force be on standby at any time to prevent the Russians from plotting to sabotage our military exercise. Captain Legoff of the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle ordered the fleet. Although there were only 10 Russian ships ahead, the French Navy would not be as blindly arrogant as the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, lest they be caught off guard by Russia. At the same time, the South Korean Navy, following the French fleet, was not as cautious as the French. After seeing that Russia was so weak, they finally put down most of their worries. Sure enough, with the distribution of the 4 major Russian fleets, it is impossible for them to rush to the Far East so quickly. This is also the weakness of their Russian Navy. The sea area is too large, and the response efficiency will be reduced. Lieutenant General Minimum Jun Heo, who was in charge of the overall command of this time, said with a smug smile in the South Korean Dokdo-class amphibious assault ship. They deliberately created a time difference with Russia, not allowing the Russian Navy to have enough time to dispatch ships to support them, just like they did last time against Japan. Your Excellency, 28 nautical miles ahead is the Russian fleet's military exercise blockade zone. At our current speed, we are expected to enter the area in 75 minutes. Do you think you should order the fleet to slow down? The first mate of the Major General asked in a suggestion. It is a very serious provocation to enter the restricted navigation zone of another country at will. Just like the last time, Japan not only entered the Russian Navy's blockade zone, but also accelerated to collide with them, trying to forcibly interrupt the Russian military exercise. The Russians only sent 10 warships to conduct military exercises in such a large area of sea. Lieutenant General Minimum Junheo looked at the restricted navigation zone of the Russian fleet again. Before, when he saw the Russians asking for such a large area of sea, he felt that they were bluffing. Now, compared with the scarce number of 10 ships, it is obvious that the Russian Navy does not need such a large area. Moreover, with the current distance between the fleets of both sides, they have to sail at full speed for at least 4 hours before they have a chance to engage in close combat, currently 450 kilometers apart. The reason why it takes 4 hours to sail before they have a chance to engage in close combat is that when traditional anti-ship missiles are launched at a distance of 300 kilometers from the target, the missile needs to fly for about 18 minutes. During this period, the target ship sails within a range of 15 kilometers. The navigation error of the missile is about 3 kilometers. The sum of the two is an 18 kilometer deviation from the aiming point. Even if the 15 kilometer range of the missile seeker is taken into account, the target cannot be intercepted. Therefore, traditional anti-ship missiles generally need to be launched at about 200 kilometers to accurately intercept the target. If it exceeds a certain value, the hit rate is very low. An interesting comparison is that in the 1980s, the range of the Tomahawk cruise missile could reach 2,000 kilometers. But the anti-ship range of the Tomahawk cruise missile can only reach 500 kilometers. In the end, the US military has not adopted it. It is mainly due to the different guidance methods. Chapter 317. Seeing that the two sides were so far apart, and the Russian military exercise area was overly exaggerated, so the South Korean Navy Commander-in-Chief, Minimum Junheo, immediately contacted the French fleet. "Hello, Captain Legoff. This is Minimum Junheo. 28 nautical miles ahead is said to be the Russian fleet's no-fly zone. It's near our military exercise area, and it's obviously done on purpose. So, what do you think?" Captain Legoff on the other end of the phone understood what Minimum Junheo meant. As long as the underwater troops found out that there was no threat ahead, it would be okay for them to provoke Russia, who told them to send 10 warships, and they had to occupy such a large area, which was too overbearing. "Captain Minimum Junheo, please ask your fleet to follow my French fleet. Maintain the current speed and continue sailing." After receiving the message that there was no danger underwater, Captain Legoff immediately issued a follow-up order to the South Korean fleet. However, at this moment, 2 Russian armed helicopters flew towards the South Korean and French joint fleet at a very fast speed, and in the process, used loudspeakers to seriously warn the fleets of the two countries not to step into their Russian military exercise area, otherwise they will bear the consequences. "Attention, ships ahead. You are about to enter the restricted navigation area of our Russian Navy. Please slow down immediately, turn around, and leave quickly. Otherwise, you will be responsible for all the consequences. Repeat, please pay attention to the ships ahead. You are about to enter the restricted navigation area of our Russian Navy. Please slow down immediately, turn around, and leave quickly. Otherwise, you will be responsible for all the consequences." Seeing that Russia only sent 2 armed helicopters as an obstruction, the Commander-in-Chief of the South Korean fleet, Minimum Junheo, smiled slightly and looked at the 2 helicopters in the sky in the distance. "Let's not talk about the French Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier battle group. Just talking about their South Korean amphibious combat ships, they can send 10 times the number of armed helicopters to engage in an air confrontation. What are the Russians thinking? Sending 2 helicopters, they want us to return. What else do you say that all the consequences are at your own risk?" The Commander-in-Chief of the South Korean fleet, Minimum Junheo, was at a loss for this warning from Russia. There was no fluctuation in his heart, and he even wanted to laugh. Their combined fleet is 4 times the size of the Russian fleet, plus the Mirage 2000 fighters, armed helicopters, anti-ship missiles, and anti-aircraft missiles on the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier. If they were to fight, they would definitely be able to abuse the Kuznetsov aircraft carrier battle group and make them doubt their lives. At the same time, on the French fleet side, Captain Legov specifically asked the first officer whether the Russian strategic bombers of the Tu-160 and Tu-95 bombers at the Russian Air Force Base had taken off. What are the movements of the Tu-160 and Tu-95 bombers at the Russian Air Force Base? The French are very concerned about Russia's supersonic strategic bombers. They are also afraid that, if they completely piss off the Russians, they will really drop nuclear bombs. However, the probability of dropping such weapons of mass destruction is still relatively low. As long as you don't cross the bottom line, you can test back and forth on the edge of the tolerance limit. In this way, France and South Korea will know where the Russian bottom line is. Captain Legov, the Detection Aircraft Center report saying that no unusual movements were detected at the Russian Far East Air Force Base. The French are still relatively cautious. They didn't want to come out and show off, only to be slapped in the face. This was really bad. Okay, I got it. Order the fleet to continue moving forward and ignore the Russian warnings, including the South Korean fleet. Notify them as well. Legov was no pushover. Since the French Navy had asked him to command the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier battle group, they must have something to rely on. Yes, Captain Legov. After receiving the order, the first mate immediately conveyed the order to his fleet and the South Korean fleet. Let everyone ignore Russia's bluffing. But not long after the order was issued, in the Russian Far East Army base, Vladivostok military base, dozens of launch vehicles loaded with missiles gathered along the coast of the Far East Sea. Each launch vehicle was equipped with 3 X-6 launchers, loaded with 18 300mm caliber missiles. Mr. Mavey, the French and South Korean joint fleets, did not heed our warnings. They are still at full speed and trying to enter our no-fly zone. A colonel in the Vladivostok military base reported to Mavey, who came to the base. At this time, Mavey was looking at the dozens of missile launchers in the distance. Later, as long as the commander-in-chief of the base gives the order to launch, the nearly 300 newly developed special missiles in front of him will be fired at the Far East high seas without reservation. Who will be hit in the end, and who will not be hit, depends on God's will. What does Admiral Wolf say? Do you really want to launch? This kind of military-level decision cannot be decided by Mavey. Even the proposal is not convenient for him to make. He can only watch the development of things and take one step at a time. According to Admiral Wolf and the meaning above, if the French and South Korean joint fleets really dare to step into our no-fly zone, then we really dare to fight. The colonel said to Mavey seriously. Obviously, what he said just now was not a joke. Okay. Mavey nodded and said nothing more. The fighting nation is the fighting nation. There is no tolerance or intolerance, bottom line or bottom line. Or rather, they have only one bottom line, that is, whoever dares to provoke me, I will beat him. If I can take action, I will never force it. Half a minute later, the officer in charge of the missile launcher received a direct order from General Wolf and immediately ignited and launched the 15 missile launchers along the coast. Yes, Your Excellency the General, the officer replied on the phone, after receiving the order. Then Mavey, who was standing in the distance, saw that the 15 missile launchers suddenly burst into a raging red flame at the tail end, and accompanied by a huge rumble and the sound of airflow, a full 270 tactical missiles were fired in an instant. It was like thousands of arrows were fired at the same time. Only bursts of smoke and the strong smell of rocket fuel after burning were left, when 270 tactical missiles were fired in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the French and South Korean joint fleets received a critical signal about the incoming missile group. Captain Legov. It's bad. According to the radar, Russia's Vladivostok military base suddenly launched nearly 300 tactical missiles towards our army. It is expected to encounter our ship in 36 minutes. Request instructions. In the captain's room of the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier, the French officer anxiously reported to Captain Legov. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318 Combined Fleet, Unrestricted Fire. What? Legov came to the radar with a surprised expression. On the radar with a search range of 750 kilometers, there were countless red dots heading towards the French and South Korean joint fleet. Judging from the distance, they were launched from the Vladivostok military base 600 kilometers away. These 300 tactical missiles are impossible to intercept because of their large number. As long as 5 or 10 missiles hit their fleet, the destructive power would be huge. This is ridiculous. Are the Russians serious? No. Where did they get the short-range missiles? Aren't all the ballistic missiles with a range of more than 500 kilometers destroyed? It's not necessarily that all these 300 missiles are intercontinental cruise missiles. Captain Legov soon realized that something was wrong. According to the Intermediate Range Missile Treaty, Russia, together with the Americans, destroyed all short-range ballistic missiles and medium-range ballistic missiles with a range of 500 kilometers to 5,500 kilometers during the Soviet era. So where did they get these 300 short-range missiles with a range of more than 500 kilometers? Did Russia violate the Intermediate Range Missile Treaty without authorization? Has it been secretly hoarding medium-range missiles? Captain Legov thought a lot in a short moment. Now they have less than 40 minutes. Russia's initiative to tear up the Intermediate Range Missile Treaty is a very serious and major event. I believe that when the news reaches the United States, it will definitely make Americans angry. Attention, all units. Listen to my orders. Turn around immediately and move at full speed to the southwest. Once these 300 missiles enter our range, immediately open fire in all directions. How many can be intercepted? Count as many. Whether we can escape this attack depends on God. Captain Legov was a little panicked, to be honest. He didn't expect that the Russians wanted to trigger the Third World War. Question mark? Didn't they just ignore the warning and enter their restricted navigation area without authorization? Is it necessary to kill them all? Question mark? The sudden missile group also made the Korean fleet following the French fleet feel unprecedented panic. Lieutenant General Minimum Jun Heo, what should we do now? The first mate looked at the 270 short-range missiles on the radar, and cold sweat had already seeped out of his face and back. He had served in the Navy for so many years, and to be honest, he had never really fought a war. So when he saw Russia's no survivors missile attack, he felt like the sky was about to fall. Didn't you hear what the French said? Turn around immediately and head southwest at full speed. Minimum Jun Heo said to his subordinates in a rage. According to the average speed of their fleet, they can only sail 13 nautical miles, or 23.4 kilometers, in 30 minutes. Such a distance cannot escape the guidance system of ballistic missiles. It is also called inertial guidance, or starlight inertial guidance. Inertial guidance is a technology that uses the principle of inertia to control and guide missiles to fly to the target. The principle is to use an inertial measurement device to measure the motion parameters of the missile, form a guidance instruction, and automatically guide the missile to the target area by controlling the direction, size, and action time of the engine thrust. Inertial guidance works in an autonomous way and does not contact the outside world, so it has strong anti-interference and good concealment. To put it bluntly, once these 270 missiles are launched, they have nothing to do with the Russian Vladivostok base. They will calibrate their direction, aim at the target, and then carry out precision strikes. Even if Russia regrets and wants to stop, it cannot. The news that the Russians directly launched ballistic missiles at the joint fleet of the two countries soon spread to the Blue House in South Korea and Paris, France. The presidents of the two countries who heard the news had almost the same expression. That is, they were obviously stunned. Some couldn't believe it. This is true. What? Russia launched 300 medium-range ballistic missiles at our fleet. Are you sure? Where did they get the medium-range missiles? How is this possible? The South Korean president was really scared. At this moment, he suddenly thought of many possibilities in his mind. According to the Intermediate Range Missile Contract, Russia cannot have medium-range missiles. And there are only a handful of countries that can provide them with such ballistic missiles. You can guess who will be secretly supporting them with just your fingers. The French president also thought a lot. He couldn't figure out what the Russians' thinking mode was. Isn't it just a joint naval exercise at home? Is it so exaggerated to bombard with 300 medium-range missiles? if his fleet, his Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier battle group, has any problems, the French president is even ready to go to war with Russia. After all, they are the Russians who have gone too far. Even if there are some conflicts at sea, they shouldn't be so cruel. Just when the presidents of the two countries were scared and sat in their offices, the South Korean and French joint fleets looked at the short-range missile group on the radar, getting closer and closer. Almost every soldier felt deeply afraid. Now they are completely scared, and many people began to regret that they should not have participated in this exercise. However, just when the Koreans and the French began to admit their fear, they saw the 270 missiles flying towards them at high speed. They are only 150 kilometers away from them. In less than 10 minutes, they will hit the fleets of the two countries. At this time, Captain Legoff immediately ordered to launch all the anti-aircraft missiles on the ship. They would intercept as many as they could. Listen to my orders. Launch all the anti-aircraft missiles of the fleet immediately, including the main battleship guns, or aim at the missile group and fire without restriction. Captain Legoff gave the order decisively. The effective interception range of anti-aircraft missiles is only 120 kilometers. Beyond this distance, the interception effect is not very meaningful. Therefore, it is necessary to intercept when the missile group is 150 kilometers apart. In this way, taking into account the time difference, it should be possible to successfully intercept at a distance of about 70 to 80 kilometers. As for the main battleship guns, they are completely used as anti-aircraft guns to shoot missiles. Anyway, with a range of about 100 kilometers, it can fire about 30 rounds per minute. Hit one, count it as one, and if you are lucky, you may be able to minimize casualties. Yes, Captain. The joint fleet received the order and immediately opened all their anti-aircraft missile launch ports. The Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier, amphibious assault ship, Aquitaine-class destroyer, Lafayette-class frigate, Doctor-class amphibious assault ship, Lone Falcon-class tank landing ship, KDX-2-class Aegis destroyer group and other 40 warships, almost at the same time, launched all the air defense missiles on the ship. Chapter 319, Heaven and Earth Destruction, Dust Settles. The vertically launched anti-aircraft missile group is as magnificent as the World War in the movie. It is definitely exciting for many men. Aim the main battleship guns. Fire. Boom. 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 The 130mm caliber naval guns of each ship continuously fired shells at the missile group in the air. They hope to stop as many missiles as possible from hitting the joint fleet. However, just when the two major fleets of South Korea and France were desperately intercepting the Russian missiles, the whistling missile group suddenly began to dive down without any signs and fell into the sea. The scene was like dumplings, plop, plop, falling into the water. Then almost in an instant, the first missile that fell into the sea exploded. The acceleration of the missiles, plus the height of the fall, made the seawater at this time as hard as cement. So as soon as the missile head touched the sea surface, it would explode. Boom. 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 The earth-shaking chain explosions blasted on the sea surface like a carpet. The amazing power of 270 short-range missiles stirred up hundreds of water columns. How spectacular the scene was, just like the magician in the movie, casting a water and fire fusion spell. It shocked everyone. What's going on? Shouldn't these missiles have locked on us? Why did they suddenly go into the sea? Captain Legoff of the French fleet was a little confused and stood in the captain's room. Now he felt very happy that he was alive. He felt very puzzled about the sudden fall of the Russian missile group. He even felt a little empty. After all, he had expected that the anti-aircraft missiles and battleship shells launched by their joint fleet would successfully intercept the missile group. But now, the anti-aircraft missiles of his country and South Korea are still flying in the sky, including the main battleship guns. They are also soaring in the sky. But the Russian missile group all fell into the sea in the void. What on earth is going on? Question mark? The commander-in-chief of the French fleet thought so, but the men around him showed a relaxed expression after surviving a disaster. They didn't care why the missiles didn't lock and fell directly into the sea. Anyway, I survived safely, and I don't need to write a suicide note. I must drink well tonight to celebrate, and not go home until I'm drunk. captain leg off. Maybe there is a malfunction in the Russian missile guidance system. Or maybe they are just trying to scare us on purpose? The first mate thought for a while and replied. He actually didn't bother to care what the problem was. Fortunately, he ran fast just now and got out of the Russians' aiming point. Otherwise, at this moment, the serial explosions like a tsunami might be the death god who harvested their lives. But then again, it seems that they have used up all the anti-aircraft missiles, and there are many 130mm caliber shells. None of them were intercepted successfully, and they all fell into the sea after flying hundreds of kilometers like the Russian missiles. They were all used to bomb fish. In the distance, those fearless war correspondents, sitting in helicopters, witnessed the scene with binoculars throughout the whole process. They were completely confused by such a weird scene. They don't understand what the Russians are doing. Should they fight properly? If they fight properly, at least let them hit a French or Korean warship. Damn, all of them are used to bomb the sea and fish. May I ask what hatred and grudges do the creatures in the ocean have with Russia? Why are they always the ones who get hurt? What is going on? How should this news and war report be written? The Russians made a mistake. 300 ballistic missiles all fell into the Far East Sea. A reporter in the cabin also felt very empty in his heart. It would be better to add that the anti-aircraft missiles of the South Korean and French joint fleets also all fell into the sea, and in the end only innocent marine life was sacrificed in vain. Another reporter said jokingly, "What happened just now may be very critical for the fleet at sea. The maximum speed of a warship is only 30 nautical miles per hour, which is less than 60 kilometers. But for a helicopter with a speed of about 300 kilometers per hour, as long as the missile group is detected in advance, there will be enough time to avoid it. After all, these missiles are flying from 600 kilometers away. They are not launched at close range. There is definitely no way to avoid them. In fact, what they don't know is that the 270 missiles launched from the Vladivostok military base in Russia are not short-range ballistic missiles or medium-range ballistic missiles. Instead, they are ultra-long-range self-propelled rocket launchers developed by Russian scientists at Mavey. That's right, it's a rocket launcher with a range of 650 kilometers. It is precision guided within 100 kilometers, and the accuracy is greatly reduced if it exceeds 120 kilometers. When the rockets fly out of 300 kilometers, they are completely uncontrolled and flying around. The error range is more than 1 kilometer. That's why they suddenly fell into the sea when they were about to approach the French and South Korean fleets. But then again, the self-propelled rockets launched by the Russian military are all used for military exercises in the Far East. To put it bluntly, it is a launch experiment of self-propelled rockets. It is not aimed at attacking the joint fleet of the two countries. If you want to blame South Korea and France for trespassing into the blockade area of the Russian military exercise. They were almost indiscriminately attacked by their self-propelled rocket groups. Mr. Mawei, our Tornado self-propelled rocket launcher was successfully tested. The number of warships of the French fleet hit was 0. The number of warships of the South Korean fleet hit was also 0. Seeing that South Korea and the French were scared away by the rocket group, the Russian army major general in charge of this operation made a humorous remark to Mawei for the first time. Someone who heard it really didn't know whether to laugh or not at this Russian humor. Although the target range of the Tornado self-propelled rocket launcher has been carefully calculated by scientists, there is a 98% chance that the rocket will not hit the joint fleet of the two countries. It is intentional not to hit, but if it hits, it will be a big trouble. But there is still 2% of force majeure factors such as extreme weather and wind direction. What if the wind on the sea today is stronger than expected, resulting in a larger error range for the rocket launcher? If you are not careful, it will hit the Koreans or the French. The consequences and the chain reaction caused by that are unimaginable. It might really trigger a 3-nation war. Thank God, we have to celebrate the 270 rounds of the Tornado self-propelled artillery with a hit rate of 0. Mawei also said a witty remark in a very Russian way. Chapter 320 Pu 20th invites Mawei to attend the UN emergency meeting. Thank God, we have to celebrate the 270 rounds of the Cyclone self-propelled artillery with a hit rate of 0. Mavey also said a witty remark in a very Russian way. He has gradually integrated into this identity and feels that he is also a part of the fighting nation. When it comes to self-propelled rocket launchers, they can't be compared with ballistic missiles. Within 120 kilometers, the cost-effectiveness of self-propelled rocket launchers is higher than that of ballistic missiles. But beyond this range, even up to 300 kilometers, 600 kilometers, and 800 kilometers, then the self-propelled rocket launcher is no different from setting off oversized fireworks. It is almost impossible to hit the target. Therefore, Americans, including Russia in the previous life, are too lazy to make a fuss about self-propelled rocket launchers. After all, weapons that cannot hit the target are meaningless to them. But, they overlooked one point. That is, self-propelled rocket launchers with an attack range of more than 280 kilometers are very popular with medium and small countries. As an export of arms, it is really the best choice. Why is it popular? That's because under the Anti-Missile Proliferation Treaty, any ballistic missile with a range of more than 300 kilometers is not allowed to be sold abroad. Because of this constraint, self-propelled rocket launchers with a range of more than 280 kilometers are introduced in large quantities as a forced deterrent for medium and small countries. The purpose is to tell neighboring countries that I have ultra-long-range rocket launchers, and once launched, they will fly randomly. I don't know where they will hit in the end. But one thing must be clear, anyway, these rocket launchers will definitely fall into your country. So before provoking me, it's better to think clearly. Otherwise, it will be a dead end, and it will be over. This is the forced deterrent of ultra-long-range self-propelled rockets. I believe that today's test will attract the attention of many medium and small countries. There must be a large number of military representatives who will visit Russia and order these unique ultra-long-range rockets. Mr. Mavey, I guess NATO and the EU will protest against these rockets developed by our Russia. The Major General of the Army said to Mavey with a smile. They played a trick on the INF treaty. The key point is that NATO and the EU don't know that Russia launched a rocket. They all mistakenly thought it was a short-range missile with a range of more than 500 kilometers. That is a serious violation of the contract. There is no way to protest. We are all doing things according to the contract. If nothing unexpected happens, they should. As the saying goes, when the enemy comes, the general will stop him. When the water comes, the earth will cover it. Anyway, if the sky falls, there is someone taller to support it. It has nothing to do with Mavey. It depends on what attitude NATO and the EU will have. Sure enough, in the evening of the same day, France, Germany, the United Kingdom and other EU countries collectively expressed strong protests against Russia's secret storage and private ownership of short-range missiles with a range of more than 500 kilometers. This is obviously a violation of the INF treaty, including some countries in the United Nations. They are also opposed to Russia's practice. It has brought turmoil to the world situation. 2 days later, the UN Security Council announced that it would hold an emergency meeting within 24 hours to discuss how to deal with Russia's violation of the contract. This is an emergency special meeting of the UN General Assembly. When there is a threat to peace, a breach of peace, or an act of aggression, the Secretary General shall convene an emergency special meeting of the Security Council within 24 hours, after receiving a request from any 9 member states to hold an emergency special meeting, or after receiving a notice of majority of the member states agreeing to hold a meeting. A resolution may be passed to require member states to take concerted action. To put it bluntly, all countries in the world must maintain a unified opinion. If anyone takes it for granted and messes up, all member states will unanimously exclude him. At that time, not only will economic sanctions be imposed, but also great pressure will be exerted militarily and politically. The UN Security Council has just announced an emergency meeting. Mavey received a call from the Kremlin. Hello, Mavey, the president asked me to ask you if you want to represent Russia to attend the emergency meeting held by the United Nations. The person who called Mavey was a staff officer of the Russian president. The United Nations meeting is not the G8 summit, and heads of state do not need to attend. Just send a representative. But this representative is not just anyone. It needs to have a certain influence in society. And the current Mavey is a very suitable candidate. Besides, the Russian Navy's conflict with the South Korean and French navies, as well as the development of ultra-long-range self-propelled rocket launchers, are all indirectly related to Mawei. So it is understandable that the Kremlin wants him to attend an emergency meeting. United Nations meeting? Mawei, who was on the other end of the phone, confirmed in a daze. He had thought about when he would enter the United Nations, but he didn't expect that this day would come so soon. The key is that this meeting is a well-known attack on Russia. Whoever represents Russia to attend will definitely become the target of public criticism. Yes, Mr. Mawei, if you are willing to participate, you must leave now. Because in 24 hours, the United Nations headquarters will hold this emergency meeting. The Russian president's staff officer urged on the phone. The United Nations headquarters is in New York, USA. The land where the headquarters building is located does not belong to the United States or any other country. It is the only international territory in the world. Okay, I'm willing to go. Considering the recent events, they all have a lot to do with me. If I refuse the invitation of the Kremlin, I'm not a man who dares to act and take responsibility. So Mawei agreed directly on the phone. Then Mr. Mawei, I wish you good luck. The relevant accompanying personnel will meet you at the airport at that time. The staff officer wished Mawei all the best. The relevant personnel he mentioned were the think tanks who knew the UN meeting process. After all, this was Mawei's first time to participate. If there were any mistakes in the process, it would not be good, and it would be super embarrassing. An hour later, Mawei met the accompanying personnel arranged for him by the Kremlin at Moscow International Airport. Speaking of which, the two were old acquaintances, that is, the secretary of the Minister of Defense, Una. She accompanied Mawei to New York, USA this time. Good afternoon, Mr. Mawei, we meet again. Una appeared in front of Mawei in a generous and decent black formal dress. Hello, Miss Una. Mawei nodded and said. Then he and the secretary of the Minister of Defense boarded the plane to attend the UN emergency meeting. Chapter 321, Stressful UN Conference. 15 hours later, Mawei's Bombardier Global Express landed safely and smoothly at the New York airport. While on the plane, he learned from Una all the procedures and basic information related to the United Nations conference. He also learned which countries are allies of Russia in the international community and will speak on their side. For example, Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, etc. In addition to these countries, the others can basically be regarded as opposing or biased towards the European Union. This situation also made Mawei feel helpless. After all, the Russians are too tough, and many countries don't like to be friends with him. Mr. Mawei, there are only 6 languages officially used at the United Nations conference, namely, Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian and Spanish. Una, who was sitting in the special car, explained to Mawei. As of 2002, the United Nations had a total of 191 members. In order to facilitate communication among everyone, the United Nations Secretariat has a large translation team with nearly 1,000 people. Since the interpretation work requires full concentration, if the translation is wrong, the misunderstanding may be very huge. Therefore, during the meeting, each language was assigned 3 interpreters, and each interpreter wore headphones to listen to the speeches and took turns to translate into the microphone. In the conference hall, each seat had a headset that could hear 6 simultaneous interpretations, and the delegates could choose the language they wanted to listen to. It was very user-friendly. An hour later, when Mawei's motorcade arrived on the east side of Manhattan, New York City, a vast modern building gradually appeared in front of him. That was the United Nations headquarters building, which had an international territory of 17 acres. The 39-story plate-type building had a green glass surface design and a square rectangular shape that resembled a matchbox. There were more than 190 flag poles in front of the building, hanging the flags of 191 UN member states. On the main flagpole was the United Nations flag with a blue background and white background. Looking at the United Nations Secretariat building in front of him, Mawei felt that he could never dream of such an awesome scene in his life. One day, he would be able to go to the United Nations to attend a meeting. This made him feel a little bit drifting. Mr. Mavey, the long row of buildings next to the Secretariat building, is the conference hall building of the United Nations headquarters. There are conference rooms of various sizes inside. Adjacent to the conference hall building is the United Nations General Assembly Hall, where the voting meetings of representatives of the United Nations member states are held. Una introduced Mavey in great detail in the car. Someone today represents the image of the entire Russia. There must not be any mistakes, otherwise it will be a big shame. Mavey also knew this, so he listened very carefully throughout the whole process. 10 minutes later, Mavey's motorcade drove to the front of the United Nations building. Then everyone passed the security check and identity verification and completely entered this international territory. Because Mavey's motorcade was hung with the Russian flag, so his appearance made some representatives of member states who were also attending the meeting nearby cast strange eyes on the motorcade. Even when Mavey and Una walked out of the car and headed for the conference hall. Along the way, he found that many people looked at their Russian delegation with a look that was difficult to describe. The reason, Mavey understood it as soon as he thought about it. All of them were about the 270 ballistic missiles launched by Russia against France and South Korea a few days ago, which had not been clarified. This aroused suspicion from some countries. Una, who was walking beside Mavey, naturally saw everyone's eyes, but she seemed to have gotten used to it. After all, Russia had few friends and many enemies in the international community. Mr. Mavey, the conference hall is in front. This emergency special meeting is the 11th. The last one was held 5 years ago. The 11th emergency meeting that Una mentioned did not exist in the previous life. In the previous life, the United Nations held only 10 emergency special meetings. The issues discussed were the Middle East issue, the Hungarian issue, the Congo issue, the situation in the Middle East, the Palestinian issue, the Namibian issue, etc. Mavey nodded after listening. At this time, she could already hear the sound coming from the door of the conference hall. Presumably, representatives from many countries had already gathered inside, and they would have a fierce and targeted discussion on the Russia's violation of the Intermediate Range Missile Treaty. Half a minute later, when Mavey and Una appeared in front of the conference hall, in the spacious, bright and magnificent hall, hundreds of representatives from various countries in suits all looked at them. The invisible pressure was no joke. After all, those who could attend the UN conference had significant influence in their respective countries. Mr. Mavey, our seats are over there, Una said to Mavey softly. The seats of the representatives of various countries were arranged in alphabetical order of the country names and rotated every year. There were seats for observers on the left and right sides of the venue. There were 2 more floors at the back of the venue. The second floor was for journalists, and the third floor was for public visitors. Under the guidance of Una, Mavey took the Russian seat. At this time, he looked up at the podium in front of him. Later, the chairman of the conference, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the Deputy Secretary General will take their seats on the podium. Then they will preside over the Russia's 500-kilometer short-range missile issue of this session. The podium of the conference was made of grey-green marble and had 3 seats on it. The President of the General Assembly was in the middle, the Secretary General of the United Nations was on the left, and the Deputy Secretary General in charge of the General Assembly affairs was on the right. Below the podium was a black marble podium with a golden UN logo on the front. It looked very solemn. Mavey could feel the representatives around him casting unfriendly glances at him and Una. Especially France and South Korea, 2 hostile countries. They had a hatred for Russia and wanted to kill it as soon as possible. I believe that when the meeting starts later, their 2 countries will be the first to bombard Russia. Just as Mavey was predicting the situation, there was a noise at the door of the conference hall. He looked back and saw 3 middle-aged foreigners in black suits, who appeared in the hall very stylishly. They were the hosts of this emergency meeting. The President of the General Assembly, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the Deputy Secretary General. Under the gaze of representatives from various countries, the 3 foreigners walked up to the podium of the General Assembly without haste. During the period, they did not forget to greet the representatives of various countries by nodding and smiling. Especially when the 3 of them passed by the Russian position, they almost turned their heads and looked at Mavey at the same time. Chapter 322, Overcoming All Difficulties and Promoting Arms in the United Nations. Especially when the three of them passed by the Russian position, they almost turned their heads to look at Mavey at the same time. They wanted to see who the representative sent by Russia was. But the President of the General Assembly, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the Deputy Secretary General originally didn't care, but when they turned their heads and saw it, they were slightly surprised. The reason was that someone in the seat was too young. Even too young. At his age, he usually participates in the Model United Nations Conference. That is, young students from various countries play the role of diplomats from their own countries, imitating the kind of conferences of the United Nations and related international organizations. Mavey, who was sitting in his seat, watched the eyes of the President of the General Assembly, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the Deputy Secretary General, and didn't respond too much. He was just waiting for the Crusade Conference to start and see what tricks the countries would use to target and suppress Russia. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend the 11th UN emergency meeting. The content of this meeting is about the 270 missiles with a range of 500 kilometers launched by Russia near the waters of Japan 5 days ago. After the president of the conference sat on the stage, he began to preside over the meeting into the microphone. The representatives of various countries in the audience had already put on their headphones and chose their own familiar languages to listen. After 8 minutes, the president of the conference finished his opening remarks. Then he handed the right to speak to the Secretary General of the United Nations, who spoke for another 8 minutes. It was not until 16 minutes had passed that the representatives of various countries began to speak. At this time, the French diplomat, holding the microphone on the table, publicly rebuked Russia, saying, 5 days ago at 3 p.m., the Russian Vladivostok military base launched 270 short-range ballistic missiles at our joint fleet. The missile has a range of more than 500 kilometers, which seriously violates the signed Intermediate Range Missile Treaty. I think it is necessary for us to call on all UN member states to impose the most severe criticism and sanctions on Russia's behavior that has caused world unrest. The French diplomat spoke emotionally at the table. Fortunately, the words he said were not directly transmitted to the ears of the representatives of various countries. Instead, they were stated in an objective and calm tone through the translator. After the French diplomat finished speaking, the President of the General Assembly, who was responsible for presiding over the meeting, naturally came out to ask and mediate. French representatives, please don't be too excited. Before the truth is clear, please don't make such remarks that are easy to provoke disputes. The President of the United Nations General Assembly and the Secretary General of the United Nations are both middlemen. Their functions can be simply summarized as peacemakers and smoothing things over. However, this kind of smoothing things over requires a very high level of skill. Otherwise, it would be absolutely unconvincing. As soon as the French diplomats raised their opinions, the Korean diplomats could not sit still and started talking loudly. This behavior of Russia is very bad and serious. At that time, if our joint fleet had not avoided it in time and made reasonable responses, we might have been completely destroyed by the ballistic missiles they launched. This kind of barbaric and brutal behavior, if there is no explanation today, it will definitely not work. The Korean representative spoke fairly fluent English. The United Nations does not have their Korean translators. Every Korean diplomat must learn English well. In addition to the opinions of the French and Korean representatives, do the representatives of other countries have any opinions to express? Russia? After listening to the opinions of the two countries, the Secretary General of the United Nations signaled Russia that it could start to respond. Otherwise, the final vote would be very unfavorable to Russia. Hearing the Secretary General of the United Nations asking the Russian side to speak, Mavey, who had been sitting quietly in his seat, knew that it was time for them to show their skills. Mr. President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, there is one thing we in Russia must clarify in advance. That is, what we launched were not ballistic missiles, but 270 ultra-long-range self-propelled rocket launchers. This does not violate the Intermediate Range Missile Treaty. Moreover, we in Russia launched these rocket launchers in the blockade area of the military exercise. The South Korean and French fleets ignored our warnings and entered the area without authorization, resulting in almost being accidentally injured by rocket launchers. Is it my fault? Mawei did not say the last sentence explicitly. Instead, he kept it in his heart. However, when his remarks were translated and heard by representatives of various countries in the United Nations, many representatives of countries suddenly showed a trace of disbelief on their faces. What? Ultra-long-range self-propelled rocket launchers? Range of more than 500, 600 kilometers? Did I hear that correctly? Russia actually developed this thing. A self-propelled rocket launcher with a range of 600 kilometers? This really does not violate the Intermediate Range Missile Treaty. No wonder all 270 Russian shells fell into the sea halfway through their flight, and they did not track the joint fleet at all. It turned out to be a rocket launcher. As the representatives of various countries whispered, the French and South Korean representatives who had made things difficult for Russia showed a trace of embarrassment on their faces. In order to make up for the disadvantage, the South Korean diplomat couldn't help but ask, "You said it was a self-propelled rocket launcher, so it is a self-propelled rocket launcher?" Words are not enough. Can you provide any evidence? As far as I know, the longest flying rocket launcher in the world is only about 280 to 300 kilometers. The United Nations emergency meeting is really comparable to an annual drama. The process is full of ups and downs and twists and turns. Hearing the Korean diplomats asking Russia for evidence, Mawei said to the diplomats, "Of course there is evidence. The one I have in my hand is a structural design drawing of the Cyclone self-propelled rocket launcher, provided by our Russian military. That is, the 270 rocket launchers launched in the Far East waters 5 days ago," Mawei said, and picked up a clarification certificate given by the military from the table. It is a detailed description of the Cyclone self-propelled rocket launcher. It can be used as evidence, but it will not disclose relevant confidential information. Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, if representatives of various countries want to see the structural design drawing of the Cyclone self-propelled rocket launcher in my hand, I have copied many copies in advance. As a successful profiteer, Mawei will not miss any opportunity to promote his arms business. Even if this is an emergency meeting of the United Nations, it is a very serious place. Mawei will try to turn it into a Russian arms propaganda conference. Let each member state representative know about the newly developed Cyclone self-propelled rocket launcher. Because the drawings in Mawei's hands are very important evidence. Therefore, the President of the United Nations General Assembly and the Secretary General of the United Nations will naturally not raise any objections. Chapter 323 Russian-style fraud. Since the drawings in Mawei's hand are very important evidence, the President of the United Nations General Assembly and the Secretary General of the United Nations will naturally not raise any objections, including the representatives of various countries present. They also want to know what this new thing made by Russia looks like. When the evidence drawings that were copied in advance were distributed to the representatives of various countries by the conference staff, a very handsome Cyclone self-propelled rocket launcher was shown in the center of the drawings. Next to it was the launcher, with detailed information and introduction. Precision guidance within 120 kilometers, 120 kilometers to 200 kilometers. The error range is within 15 meters, 200 kilometers to 300 kilometers. The error range is within 48 meters. Such surprising data, the representatives of various countries in the United Nations really couldn't believe it. What kind of self-propelled rocket launcher is this, with precision guidance at 120 kilometers? Is it a missile or a rocket launcher? It was the first time that the Italian diplomat saw such a self-propelled rocket launcher in the world. Such a novel and alternative concept made him confused for a moment. What exactly is the thing in front of him? Super long-range Cyclone self-propelled rocket launcher. The range can reach 650 kilometers. This thing is very good. And it has a guidance system, which can be used as a missile and deter others. The key is that this self-propelled rocket launcher is not restricted by the Anti-Missile Proliferation Agreement. Some representatives of medium and small countries were no longer interested in discussing the Russia's 500-kilometer range ballistic missile issue. They were almost immediately attracted by the Cyclone self-propelled rocket launcher on the drawing. You say this thing is a rocket launcher. It also has a guidance system, which can accurately strike. But if you say it is a missile, it is more than 120 kilometers. Just a few rocket launchers flying randomly, but the range is a bit far. Many small countries are very excited when they see it. This is with a guidance system. It should be a ballistic missile, right? The German and British representatives who had not spoken much finally couldn't sit still and asked. The self-propelled rocket launcher that subverted everyone's imagination made the EU countries feel a little panic. If the Russian Cyclone rocket launcher is completely successfully developed, some countries in the Middle East, such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, and Iran, will certainly be very willing to buy it. These oil-producing countries like this kind of powerful and long-range deterrent weapon. This will make them feel very safe. No, this is a self-propelled rocket launcher, Maweli said to everyone in a decisive tone. No matter what missile characteristics the Cyclone rocket launcher has, what they developed in Russia is a rocket launcher. Faced with such an impeccable edge design, even Russia's mortal enemy, the European Union, has no way to deal with it. In the end, more than 100 UN member states voted to confirm that Russia did not violate the Intermediate Range Missile Treaty. So this UN emergency meeting was not as serious as imagined. Russia's ballistic missile crisis has been successfully resolved. However, Maweli has another matter that needs to be announced at the United Nations, which is, Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, 5 days ago, the French and South Korean joint fleets launched hundreds of anti-aircraft missiles and hundreds of artillery shells in the Far East. During the flight, they hit several submarines of the Russian Navy. These submarines were originally participating in this Far East military exercise, but now they have been blown up like this by the French and South Korean fleets, Maweli said, and took out another document from the table, which showed the destroyed Russian submarines. There are 2 in total. After identification, the damage was caused by the anti-aircraft missiles of the French and South Korean fleets 5 days ago. Looking at this piece of evidence that suddenly appeared, the South Korean and French representatives in the conference hall were stunned in their seats in disbelief, with a blank mind. What? In the conflict in the Far East waters 5 days ago, the victims were not France and South Korea, but Russia? Oh my god. What's going on? The French anti-aircraft missiles and main naval guns did not intercept the self-propelled rocket launchers, but blow up the Russian submarines? What kind of operation is this? Many representatives of member states present, some of whom did not understand, showed thoughtful expressions. They never thought that there would be a reversal in the end. In fact, this is not a reversal, but an action that Russia took into account the joint fleet of the 2 countries. Then, in the area where the anti-aircraft missiles and main artillery shells fall, some submarines that are about to be retired, or submarines that have been renovated by the Moy shipyard are deployed in advance. These ships are equipped with automatic driving systems. Due to different search directions, they previously hid in the blind spot in the southwest of the joint fleet of South Korea and France. That side is close to the coast, and the French nuclear submarines will not search there, nor will they throw sonar buoys, including the direction of travel of the joint fleet of the 2 countries. It is not heading southwest. So it gives Russia a lot of preparation opportunities for retired submarines and refurbished submarines. Give them enough time to take advantage of the chaos, to reach the artillery drop area, and then wait for the French anti-aircraft missiles and anti-aircraft naval guns to fall on their heads. This operation is simply a professional hit. Anyway, it is not necessary to bomb all of them, as long as there is one ship that is hit by the shell. The task and mission will be gloriously completed. If there is no one, it is God's will. However, Russia is not at a loss. For the professional hit, Maweli, who has many tricks, would be unreasonable if he did not participate in it. It's just that he came up with the idea after the Russian military decided to test fire 270 Cyclone self-propelled rocket launchers. He actually didn't know that things were developed so smoothly. Looking at the development of the incident, it was so ups and downs and confusing. The media reporters sitting in the second area and the audience were just like watching the annual blockbuster in the theater. So exciting. Especially those newspaper reporters. At this moment, they have already thought of how to name the front page news for tomorrow. It's just that there are too many key points, and a title name can't summarize them all. In the Far East maritime conflict, Russia's ultra-long-range self-propelled rocket launcher showed its power. Accuracy of 100 kilometers, comparable to ballistic missiles. This is a title that Saudi reporters thought of. I believe that Russia's ultra-long-range self-propelled rocket launcher will definitely interest the Saudi royal family. A shocking reversal. It turns out that in the naval battle between Russia, France, and South Korea, it was Russia that suffered the most damage. 2 submarines were hit by shells and missiles from the joint fleet of France and South Korea. This is a title that Ukrainian reporters thought of at the venue. Chapter 324, Cyclone Self-Propelled Rocket Launcher Sells Well. This is a title that Ukrainian journalists thought of at the conference. They are not concerned about the self-propelled rocket launcher. Instead, they are concerned about whether their ally Russia has suffered a big loss. Obviously, they have suffered a lot this time. France and South Korea are naturally unwilling to buy into the evidence that Russia suddenly produced. They asked to send their own team to verify the bombing of the submarine that Russia said. However, the results were very different. It was indeed their French As-4 anti-aircraft missile and South Korea's main naval guns. Faced with Russia's naked touch, even if they knew that this was a long-prepared conspiracy, with ironclad evidence, the French and South Koreans must admit it. After all, this time it was their fault, and they couldn't get rid of it. As for compensation, it is definitely not as simple as just compensating for 2 submarines. According to the nature of the badness, Russia asked France and South Korea to pay $200 million as compensation. The cost includes the price of the 2 submarines, as well as Russia's mental damage and reputation damage. Anyway, not a penny less. In addition to compensation, a public apology is also necessary. This naval war is much more tortuous and bizarre than the one caused by Japan last year. The netizens have been discussing Russia's shocking counterattack for several weeks. Oh my god. The Russians are too good, right? Not only did they develop an ultra-long-range self-propelled rocket launcher with 120 kilometers of precision guidance, but they also claimed $200 million from the French and Koreans in the end. I can only say that this is too cool. Wonderful, really wonderful. This is much more exciting than our palace dramas and harem battles. The key is that it really happened. It's a pity that the official details are not many. 2333. This battle between Russia and France and South Korea is comparable to the Normandy landing during World War II. If it is adapted into a movie, it will definitely be a big hit at the box office. Isn't it? As netizens said, this naval confrontation in Russia did make 2 large film companies want to adapt it into a script, and they are actively in contact. This kind of show-off operation made the heads of the 2 film companies want to know who made it. But in order to protect someone's safety, the Russian government refused to disclose too much information about the incident. The film can be shot, but the screenwriter can only imagine it. So, the last Russian man named Gosowski became the protagonist of the whole movie story. From the development of ultra-long-range self-propelled rocket launchers, to the shocking reversal of design and layout. All planned by this man. Very legendary personal heroism. This movie adapted from real events is expected to be released worldwide in the second half of next year. I believe that by then, it will bring another wave of popularity. Let the audience relive the shocking operation of the Russian Gosowski in 2002. Regarding the initial script of the movie, the culprit Maweli has naturally read it. Many of the details in it are exaggerated. He did not order the government to carry out rocket artillery bombing on the joint fleet of South Korea and France, although this is indeed very impressive. And there are not so many voices of opposition in Russia. After the UN emergency meeting officially ended, according to the verdict, the Koreans and French paid Russia $120 million, and he apologized in public. The ultra-long-range rocket launchers that Russia is developing have been favored by many countries. Hello, is this Mr. Moy? I'm from the Algerian Ministry of Defense. I would like to ask you if your country's 650-kilometer ultra-long-range self-propelled rocket launcher can be ordered now. Our Minister of Defense is very interested in it. The representative of the Algerian Ministry of Defense asked Moy on the phone. Algeria is an important military country in Africa. It is the largest country in Africa and the third largest economy in the Middle East. It is adjacent to Libya in the east and is very rich in mineral resources. It is a major arms consumer. It can be ordered, no problem. How much does your country need? Mawey asked on the phone with ease. What about the price of the self-propelled rocket launcher? Mr. Mawey, the representative of the Algerian Ministry of Defense, wanted to know the approximate price. A Cyclone rocket launcher system costs about $15 million. It can launch a variety of warheads such as grenades and cluster bombs. However, rocket launcher warheads need to be purchased separately. $15 million for a rocket launcher is considered expensive. Self-propelled rocket launchers in other countries are often sold for around $3 to $5 million. But you get what you pay for. Obviously, Russia's Cyclone rocket launcher has a long range and high accuracy. The deterrent power is even stronger. $15 million per rocket launcher. Then, we in Algeria may need to order about 20 rocket launchers. Algeria's military budget is $300 million, so it can only order 20 rocket launcher systems. Is that so? Okay, but I'll give you a friendly reminder. A few days ago, Morocco said that it wanted to order 50 Cyclone rocket launcher systems. Mawey said on the phone with a faint tone. His friendly reminder was all true. The reason why I had to tell the Algerian representative was that Morocco and Algeria had a border war due to territorial disputes. The relationship was very bad. The national strength of the two countries can be said to be evenly matched, and Morocco is not afraid of Algeria. It even had conflicts with Spain. So after learning that Russia had this kind of ultra-long-range export rocket launcher, I immediately used my connections to find Mawey. Morocco wants 50 rocket launchers? Mr. Mawey, please wait a moment. I will call you in half an hour. Oh no. I will call you in 20 minutes. The representative of the Algerian Ministry of Defense suddenly said on the phone with an anxious tone. He asked Mawey to wait for him for 20 minutes, that is, to report the news just now to the Minister of Defense. Although the two countries are not fighting much now, they have always been comparing and competing with each other, especially in the arms competition. Algeria does not want to lose to Morocco. Okay, let's contact each other then. Mawey does not have the worries of Algeria. Anyway, he is an arms dealer, just selling arms and collecting money. 20 minutes later, the Algerian representative called Mawey again in a hurry and said, "Hello, Mr. Mawey, sorry to have kept you waiting. Regarding your country's Tornado self-propelled rocket launchers, we in Algeria want to buy 70 of them. That's $850 million. Chapter 325 Bugatti Veyron launched. Since Mawey is the only one in the world that sells rockets with a range of more than 500 kilometers, his business is extremely simple. Countries like Algeria and Morocco have not even been visited yet, but they have already pre-ordered rockets. They are afraid that Russia will be behind in delivery due to the tight delivery period. Sure, then your government is welcome to visit Russia for inspection and visit. For Mawey now, an arms order of $850 million is a basic operation. For orders below this amount, if the other party bargains for a long time and does not buy, then Mawey is really too lazy to talk. In addition to the hot Tornado rocket business, Mawey has received good news in the past few days. That is, the Bugatti Veyron super sports car that he asked Bugatti to develop and produce is finally coming out. During the development of the car, it attracted countless eyes and curiosity from the outside world. Many rich second generations who love sports cars and related media have been asking Bugatti how the new concept sports car is sold, how many are the restrictions, and what the basic performance is. But all of them were kept secret by Bugatti on the grounds of commercial confidentiality. At most, they only revealed to the outside world that this new car that was about to be successfully developed would set the highest price record in history. It's not that they sell it expensively, but the research and development costs and material costs are already sky high. Chairman Mawey, according to our calculations, if the price of each Bugatti Veyron is set at $5 million, then we only need to sell 57 cars to recover the research and development costs and the cost of 57 sports cars. What do you think? The pricing of Bugatti Veyron is decided by Mawey. So the president of Bugatti still needs to ask him what he thinks. then round it up and sell it for 10 million US dollars. In this way, we only need to sell 28.5 cars to recover the cost. Mavey made a prompt decision. 285 million super sports car research and development funds. This is unprecedented in history. Even well-known car manufacturers such as Ferrari, Porsche, and McLaren dare not invest such a large amount of money in the early stage. The reason is that the most expensive super sports car currently sold is only about 1.6 million US dollars. If it exceeds this standard too much, it may be ignored. After all, the money to buy a Bugatti Veyron can buy several Ferrari Entus. This is too expensive. Ordinary rich second generations, and even some first tier wealthy people, can't bear this pressure at all. 10 million US dollars? Okay, I get it. Chairman Mavey. Bugatti's president was a little uneasy about Mavey's pricing. Even before, Mavey told him the approximate pricing range. But when he really heard it, Bugatti's president was still a little unsure. He wondered if such an expensive car could be sold. Well, give me news after the new car launch conference is set. Mavey is not worried about the low sales of Bugatti Veyron. Anyway, the positioning of this car is the world's top and most expensive luxury car. And according to convention, it is not open to the European market. There are too many famous sports car manufacturers in Europe, and the industry competition is very fierce. When Volkswagen acquired Bugatti, it suffered from the competition in the European market. They were afraid that the sports cars would be too expensive to sell, so they set the price very low, resulting in serious losses. In the previous life, Bugatti company had a wrong positioning. Each Bugatti Veyron was only sold for 1 million US dollars. This price is almost equal to its material cost, plus labor costs and taxes. What a hammer. So Volkswagen sold 357 Bugatti Veyrons in a row, but did not recover its original R&D investment. In this way, Volkswagen is losing money for almost every Veyron sports car sold. It is a blessing to be able to recover the cost in one's lifetime. This does not count global inflation. More than 200 million US dollars in 2005 and 200 million US dollars in 2017 are completely different concepts. 2 days later, Bugatti Automobile Company under Mavey Group officially announced it to the public. The newly developed Bugatti Veyron sports car will be displayed at the Dubai International Motor Show in mid-May 2002. As soon as this news came out, many wealthy people who were looking forward to the car were all ready to go to Dubai in May this year. Let's see what this gimmicky and most expensive sports car in the world looks like, and how expensive it will be. Some people guess that the price in North America is 3.5 million US dollars, and some guess that it is 4 million US dollars. These amounts do not include import tariffs, consumption taxes, value-added taxes, etc. Otherwise, it should be at least 50% higher. At 10 AM on May 16th, the world-famous rich car show, the Dubai International Motor Show, finally kicked off. All the vehicles at the auto show are toys of the rich in the Middle East. If they like one, they will spend money to buy it, and they are so rich. Therefore, many international car dealers have tried their best to please these billionaires, and come up with various novel and cool concept sports cars and super motorcycles. It's a pity that in 2002, the supercar industry in the world was still in the development stage. Like the top 10 luxury cars, Koenigsegg 11, Lykan Hypersport, Maybach Exelero, Silver, etc., they will not be developed until 10 years later. So even if car dealers want to come up with something new, they have to consider their own strength first. As the big boss of Bugatti, Mavey naturally wants to come to the auto show to see the market reaction. In order not to show up and attract attention, enjoy the low-key life of ordinary people. This time he also disguised himself, and a friend in Dubai was not notified, including the Great Prince of Dubai who has a close relationship with him. In Dubai in May, the highest temperature is around 35 degrees and the lowest temperature is 18 degrees, so this time in the morning is very comfortable. Mavey just wore grey shorts, a black t-shirt, and ordinary sneakers, and set off. As for the 3 sets of sunglasses, masks, and hats to cover up his identity and face, they are naturally indispensable. If there are bodyguards, bring 2, and they are still the kind of casual clothes, keeping a distance behind them. As for the vehicle, there is no need to be too high profile. A Lamborghini Aventador is enough for transportation. After all, Maweli has long since gotten rid of the interest of using sports cars to show off himself. He is the big boss who invests in the research and development of super concept sports cars. 10 minutes later, when Maweli drove a purple Lamborghini Aventador and appeared in the parking lot of the Dubai International Motor Show, he magically discovered that almost a quarter of the super luxury cars parked here were Lamborghinis. There are more than Ferraris. The key is that among these Lamborghini sports cars, 2 are Lamborghini Venenas and 3 are Lamborghini Reventons. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.